That was the main character. Frozen, he muttered about the cold, until suddenly he exclaimed joyfully when he found the right herb. In the little boy's hands shone a green sprout, his first catch. Looking at the basket, he counted that the gathered amount was worth only 2 copper coins. Sighing, he thought that this was not enough. He needed to search more. The boy briefly raised his eyes to the sky. He was 6. From the past life, only memories of carefree games and a world that seemed like a distant dream remained. He decided to gather a little more. After all, at this moment he felt like a hero of the game, where every blade of grass is a step to a new level. The events rewind 6 years back. The main character opens his eyes and sees an unfamiliar ceiling. Definitely not the one under which he used to fall asleep before. What is this place? What time is it? I'm late, flashed through his mind. Like a typical office worker, even in panic he thought about work. He tried to move, in vain. His body did not obey. Even words got stuck in his throat. Fear squeezed his chest. Finally, he managed to raise his hand. It was tiny, trembling, childlike. He looked at it in panic, not understanding what had happened. Suddenly, a voice was heard. Strange. This time the baby hardly cries. The second replied that the child was extraordinarily calm. A man appeared before his eyes, who leaned closer. He wanted to look at the baby. The hero did not understand a single word. This man did not look modern, and was definitely not Japanese. But when he took him in his arms, the boy felt. This was his father. Thus he realized that he was born again, in another world. The former 30-year-old office worker received a second chance, and a new name aristocrat, Arod Senver. Events return again to the present. Little Arod walks through the forest and thinks about how strange this nobility is if a 6-year-old child is forced to work. He sighs sadly, remembering that their family is only a poor branch of a great lineage. Luxury can only be dreamed of. Even his father, Ryan Lever, has to do side jobs, making paper umbrellas. Arod smiles bitterly. The second life is not always easier. In 6 years in this world, he has learned many things. He often wondered why heroes of other reincarnation stories do not strive to return back. But probably infants are not given to understand this. Life in the new world is itself a trial with a star. The hero has often stood on the edge of despair. It took him years just to get used to living like an ordinary child. When he was fed baby porridge, he only dreamed of normal food. Now Arod holds a basket of herbs in his hands, feeling warmth from it. Here there is no need to rush to work or report to the boss. In this world, there are no unpaid overtime hours, and it is hard to believe that one can return home before sunset. He thought that this is probably what a peaceful retirement looks like, a quiet life without fuss. But suddenly he heard a rumble and became alert. Looking around, the hero moved toward the sound. It turned out, a bear attacked a group of travelers, and they were desperately fighting. When the beast lunged at one of them, the man sharply jumped up, ordered his comrade to act. He responded with a spell and released a fireball. The boy froze in amazement, watching this from the clearing. It was magic. Real magic. He saw it for the first time and was fascinated. Having defeated the beast, the hunters laughed joyfully. One praised his friend, who replied jokingly that it was all thanks to his magic. The blonde simply smiled, as if to say, it was just luck. They decided to return to the guild, celebrate the victory, and drink to excess. They climbed into the carriage and galloped out of the forest. Arod stood stunned. Magic. Not everyone is given it. To obtain it, one must undergo divine revelation. This is a birthday ceremony when a person thanks God for life. If lucky, strength awakens in it. But magic is like a lottery. You can't buy it, and you might never get it in your whole life. Arod had no luck for the 6th year in a row, and it was then that he saw the glow of the magic sphere. The boy stepped closer, his eyes glowing with anticipation. Not knowing what to do, he stretched out both hands to take this mysterious sphere. As soon as Arod touched the bullet, it instantly dissolved into the air. The boy was surprised. What was that? And why did it disappear just by touching it? Despite the oddity, he admitted that it was beautiful. After that, he decided to return home. When he stepped over the threshold, he cheerfully said that he had already arrived. His mother greeted him with warm words. The woman gently said that he was probably tired and asked if he had hurt himself anywhere. The boy smiled. Everything was fine. He had earned as many as 4 middies today. But suddenly, a noise sounded in the house. Everyone turned around. Robin stood at the door. He, staggering, said he had returned. Mother immediately asked if he had been drinking again. He confirmed, and proudly added, that Kevin had invited him to the Craftsman Street. Robin also boasted that he is the most respected person there, and in general such acquaintances are very useful for the family. Mother only smiled awkwardly and said that it was wonderful. Let him continue in the same spirit. Robin replied that he had already eaten, so he would not stay for dinner. Whistling a cheerful melody, he went up to his room, and Arod sighed heavily. At that moment, his mother called him by name. She gently reproached him not to sigh like that. Robin is the eldest son, therefore the future head of the family, and he needs connections. The boy smiled and replied that he understood everything. In the world of aristocrats, heredity has enormous significance. Even in poor families, all resources converge to the eldest. He is the one raised and nurtured as the hope of the family. That's how it is here, and nothing can be done about it. The main character had no intention of arguing with fate, but he was not going to go with the flow either. In this world, everything comes back like a boomerang. So Arod decided he would leave home on his own, even if he had only 4 middy coins in his pocket. His determination was unwavering. Since then, the hero's days passed between home and the forest. Every day he gathered medicinal herbs among the dense thickets, which had already become like a garden to him. Then he exchanged what he collected for coins. Sometimes he noticed hunters deep in the forest, hired by the guild. They hunted using magic. Sometimes strange light flared near them. Arod called it the trace of magical power. But after the battle, the mages gasped, exhausted by their own strength. The boy always approached these balls of light. They had no visible source but shone by themselves. It was enough to touch them, and they dissolved, leaving a mysterious sensation. Several months passed. One morning, Arod touched his forehead and exclaimed with delight. The day he had been waiting for had come. He stood with his family on a slope, from which there was a view of a huge estate. "How big it is," the boy said. He was sternly reminded not to express admiration aloud, so as not to embarrass the family. People around were chatting. This year's celebration was even more luxurious. Others whispered that today was the birthday of the eldest son of the head of the family. Arod was surprised. Could a whole queue of guests have gathered just to congratulate a child? He mentally admitted, this is it, the real life of the aristocracy, lavish and brilliant. In his hands was a dish, and in his mouth, another piece, so delicious that he could not stop. "You won't taste this at home," thought the boy, unable to contain his admiration. But his father was already calling him by name. Arod hastily wiped his mouth with a handkerchief, and the man, looking at him, frowned as if to say, "Don't be such a glutton." Then he turned to both sons and called them to him. For some time they knelt before the Lord, expressing gratitude for the honor of seeing him. He squinted and asked the father if some mistake had occurred. Arod immediately understood. This was the head of the entire great family. His father respectfully replied that it was correct and thanked for the invitation to this year's celebration. Then he introduced his eldest son, Robin, who, although nervous, instantly raised his head upon hearing his name. Robin said, "I am Robin Lee Ver." Arod thought that his brother spoke awkwardly. The head of the family, Melared, sternly advised him to be more diligent, so as not to disgrace the surname. Robin only silently nodded. Father asked if it was not wonderful to receive guidance from the head of the family himself. Robin, blushing, replied that it was a great honor. Arod just sighed. He was not even introduced. He glanced at his brother. Why was he happy about an ordinary formality? Then he shifted his gaze to the head of the family. It was clear why Robin was trembling, for this man truly inspired terror. Later, everyone went out into the yard. Fireworks rose into the sky. The crowd erupted with delight. Arod could not take his eyes off. They were magical lights. With a loud announcement, the host invited all noble ladies and gentlemen to watch the performance of the best mages of the family. And 6 figures stepped onto the arena. The crowd murmured, "You don't see this every day. Is Master Irma here too? Of course, she is the most powerful aristocrat of our time." After this, the hero noticed something strange. At that moment, Robin called out to him, surprised at why he was staring so wide-eyed. After all, a real magical duel was going on behind them. Arod stretched his finger forward and said he was looking at those glowing orbs, traces of magic. He explained that such lights remain after sorcery, though he himself did not know why. The brother just scratched the back of his head, not understanding what was meant, and asked what other glowing things he was referring to. Arod repeated, "Over there, just in front of them." The boy pointed again with his hand, but Robin, looking around, just shrugged. He saw nothing strange. Arod insisted, but the brother repeated that it was empty there. The hero was overwhelmed with disappointment. After all, he had definitely seen those orbs. He tried to argue, but Robin firmly denied it. There was no light. Then, grimacing, Robin asked if he had slept poorly today, and ordered him not to talk nonsense. "We are at the Lord's feast, don't embarrass me," he added. And then Arod realized, no one but him saw these traces. Suddenly he noticed the maid, Anna, and apologizing, called her over for a moment. She approached, curious about what had happened. The boy pointed to the place where he had seen the glow and asked if she noticed anything strange. The girl blinked in confusion. Apologizing, Anna said she did not quite understand what was meant. Arod nodded, as if to say everything was clear, and himself apologized for the strange question. Covering his mouth with his hand, he pondered. There were many traces of magic around, but no one except him paid attention to them. And then it dawned on him. Only he could see these remnants of power. At that moment, he felt movement behind him and turned around. In the crowd, someone exclaimed in surprise, "Who is that girl?" Others replied that she was the daughter of the Lewis family, longtime allies of their house. One of the men addressed her, calling her Aria, and asked her to show everyone her magic. The girl smiled and agreed, gently calling him uncle. Silence fell all around. Everyone from the guests to Melared himself watched as Aria folded her hands and began to recite the spell. Her voice poured out in incomprehensible words, and when she raised her hand up, a fiery ball burst from her palm and flew into the sky, scattering heat. Then she bowed gracefully and thanked for the attention. Arod looked at her with wide-open eyes. It was incredible. He thought about what it takes to be so lucky, to be born into aristocracy and also to receive magic. She won 2 lotteries of fate at once, and suddenly, a magic ball flashed before the hero's eyes again. Without thinking, he stretched out his hands and grabbed it. Strange words flashed through his mind like fragments of a spell. Fiery energy was growing, and he felt something within him had reached its peak. Mastery was complete. Arod sharply recoiled, overwhelmed by fear. He exclaimed, "What was that just now?" The boy rubbed his ear, checking if it was a trick of the mind. But eventually he understood. No, it really happened. In memory, the same words sounded again. A fragment of the fireball reached the summit. Mastery achieved. Unfamiliar symbols flashed before the eyes. He looked at his own palm, not believing what had happened, then shifted his gaze to the solitary tree nearby and slowly approached it, unaware that the Melared family was watching him closely. Arod stretched out his hand, closed his eyes, and thought of only one thing: to release a fireball from it. Focusing, he opened his eyes and cast the spell directly at the trunk, and suddenly the tree fell with a crack. People screamed, "Lightning?" But looking closer, they saw that it was uprooted. A blond young man in a hat exclaimed, "It's not lightning, it's magic!" Everyone around buzzed. Who could have done that? The boy pointed at Arod. "There he is. He launched the fireball." The hero stood as if struck by thunder. He looked at his hands. Could it really be that he mastered magic? Goosebumps ran down his spine. It seemed to him that his brain was boiling with excitement. Endorphins or adrenaline, he did not understand. But it was amazing. He realized how wonderful it was to feel magic by touch. For him, who had never known power, this feeling was completely new. His face flushed red. He thought that such a feeling could only be experienced in this world. It was clear that the boy was happy, although anxiety gnawed at his soul. His hands trembled. His heart beat wildly. For the first time in 6 years after reincarnation, he felt such a surge and excitement. Then Arod looked around, glanced again at the fallen tree, and thought that shooting blindly was too dangerous. So he decided to try differently. Raised his hand up, focused, and released a magical charge into the sky. The fireball dissolved in the heights. The attempt succeeded. The hero felt how hard it was to control such power. He became curious whether others had experienced something similar. Uncertainty involuntarily trembled in his gaze. Turning around, Arod saw that everyone around was looking right at him. People whispered, amazed that a boy of such age had already mastered magic and even used it twice in a row. He himself was surprised. Twice? He felt dizzy. He sensed his body weakening. Is this mana? He thought. Magic consumes mana energy, and when it is low, there is a feeling as if you have been drained to the bottom. Everything before his eyes was blurry. He remembered how he once played a mage in RPG games, exhausting mana to 0. What happened this time? Meanwhile, people around said that the boy had an amazingly strong, magical power for his age. Of course, they said, he is a blood descendant of the Count. True blue blood. Some added that without noble origin, this would be impossible. He must continue to develop. The boy has great potential, and the Lord's own family members only smiled bitterly. Here it is, the belief in pure blood. People always seek a special reason for what they do not understand. Irma, the senior aristocrat, said that if all this is true, then the boy is truly incredible. After all, even an experienced mage, after releasing such a sphere, would lie in bed for 3 days. Meanwhile, the crowd applauded and rejoiced, congratulating Arod. The boy smiled shyly and thought that even in his past life he was never praised like this. Suddenly he heard a gentle voice behind him. You can use magic too, right? He turned around and saw Aria before him. The girl smiled, introduced herself. My name is Aria Grace Louis, and asked his name. Arod replied, I am Arod Senver. Aria said excitedly that it was the first time she saw a child who had the same magic as she did. She extended her hand, offering friendship. The boy smiled and shook her hand. Of course, we will be friends. He thought that it seemed like the first time in this world he had touched a girl's hand. And it embarrassed him a little. His heart in his chest beat even stronger. Aria suddenly said with feigned offense, But I will never lose to you, and walked away, still smiling sweetly. At that smile, even Arod's fingers trembled. At that moment, Melared himself approached the boy, laughed in surprise, and said, So this is Vera's son. Arod nodded embarrassedly. Count Barton asked why he hadn't told last time that he possessed magic. The boy scratched the back of his head confusedly. You didn't ask, he added mentally. Then I myself didn't know I could do magic, because no one except me had seen the magical fragments. The Count looked at him seriously. Arod was shy. It would be rude to look away. He needed to learn etiquette from his father, Ryan. Finally, Barton smiled. "You are a funny boy." His gaze remained firm, but now without malice. Arod sincerely thanked him. Then the Count turned and asked if his father was present here. He immediately bowed deeply. "Yes, my lord. I am here." Barton put his hand to his forehead, examining from where exactly the man was speaking. Arod thought that his father was standing behind him. The Count said, "You have a good son. He listens to elders and does not interfere in conversations. True upbringing." The father, embarrassed, apologized for his behavior, and Arod smiled mentally. "But I am over 30. Count Barton said he would contact them later, so they should wait for news, and slowly walked away. The father bowed low and confirmed that he understood everything. Aria returned to Arod again, spoke with a charming smile. "We will see each other again. I wish you all the best." The crowd exploded with surprise. People could not believe what had happened. The boy not only showed strength, but also gained the favor of the Count himself. The father called Arod by name and said that everything turned out wonderfully. The boy turned to him and agreed somewhat uncertainly, lowering his gaze. He thought that he really did belong to the aristocrats, although their house was so poor that he hardly felt it. And among the crowd, his brother stood with a stone face, malicious with envy. Several days passed. Arod was again in the forest, gathering medicinal herbs and mushrooms, as he did every day. Nearby, he noticed a rabbit. The boy licked his lips. The animal was wary, but did not run away. Probably it considers him an ordinary child, so it is not afraid. Arod thought that in the mountains they were hardly hunted, so this rabbit was too carefree and vulnerable. Focusing, the boy created a small fireball in his palm. The main thing is to act carefully, not to attack openly, he thought, and cast the spell toward the prey. The blow hit precisely. The bullet was not very powerful, but it was enough to knock the animal aside. It stopped moving. The hero exclaimed with excitement that he had succeeded. Now, having magic, he can not only gather herbs, but also hunt a true achievement. And suddenly, near the rabbit's body, he noticed a familiar glow. The same magical orb he had seen before. Arod was surprised. Why doesn't it disappear? He thought. Maybe because it's a fragment of my own magic? Or because I have already mastered the fireball? The boy looked around and decided to search some more. He moved deeper among the trees, curiously peering into the shadows of the forest. He looked carefully behind every bush, and finally saw another such magical fragment. He stopped, staring at it. "Looks like wind magic," flashed through his thoughts. No burns or marks, not at all like fire. Hoping, he reached out his hand to the glow. Barely touching it, he felt the orb scatter into countless tiny particles. Arod shuddered, his face slightly reddened with excitement. Everything's fine, he thought. If this is new magic, then I can master it. Later, the boy returned to the city, walking along the road and humming something cheerful. Near the shop, he addressed the merchant. "Sir, may I talk to you?" The man smiled and asked if he really helps his mother. Arod pulled the rabbit's body from his bag and inquired if it could be sold. Hope flashed in his eyes. The shopkeeper carefully examined the carcass, placed it on the counter, and said it was a mountain rabbit. Then he asked skeptically if the boy really caught it himself. Taking the prey in his hands, the merchant noted, "No blood. The meat is fresh. Strange. How did you catch it?" he asked. Arod hesitated for a moment about how to answer. Finally, he admitted, "With the help of magic." The old man jumped up in surprise. "You're a genius, boy." Arod shrugged. "I have ordinary hands, nothing special." The merchant smiled. "I've lived 40 years and never achieved anything like this. And you are a lucky one whom the gods gave power." Arod just laughed. "So what about the meat? Shall we make a deal?" "Maybe." The man drawled and asked if the boy could bring such rabbits regularly. Arod nodded and said he probably could. The shopkeeper beamed with a smile. "Now that's the spirit. You wouldn't expect less from a mage," He handed over a pouch of coins. "This is for you. If you bring them often, I'll pay more." Arod thanked him, his eyes shining with joy. At farewell, the seller wished him caution on the return road. When the boy counted the money, he could not believe his eyes. He would earn that much only for a whole day of gathering herbs. Incredible. Such an amount, thought Arod. This is not a raise. This is a real miracle. And all thanks to magic. With it, every step is bigger than the previous one. He raised his hand in front of him, staring at the palm. Here it is. Power. Magic. Then he looked at the shiny coins in his pocket. The more magic I use, the better I will live, he thought. A strange life hack, but it works. So, I need to look for more fragments. Arod decided that in such a big city they definitely had to be there. He wandered the streets, looking into every corner, but with every step the disappointment grew. He had searched countless places and found not a single fragment. His face tensed. This simply could not be. The main character sat on the brick wall, pondering why everything happens exactly like this. At that moment he heard screams. Someone was begging to stop. Arod sharply turned his head toward the sound. The stranger stood in front of the girl and insistently said that he had done so much for her, so she should at least go for a walk with him once. She coldly replied that she had already said no. Then the boy boldly retorted that she shouldn't talk nonsense. The hero felt a surge of indignation inside. Such scoundrels exist in any world, he thought, clenching his fists. But he understood that he could not intervene openly. Arod decided to distract the rogue by accidentally missing. He stood up, stretched his arms, preparing to shoot. But suddenly, he noticed that someone else had already intervened. The boy nearby used the power of the wind. Arod looked closely. One of the youths really used magic to teach the bully a lesson. "You can't do that. It's indecent," he said calmly to the hooligan. The latter cursed and promised to bury him, but the next gust of wind lifted the offender into the air again. He was thrown back. He broke through several crates and fell to the ground. The defender turned to the girl. "Are you not hurt?" She assured him that everything was fine and thanked him. "Thank God," the boy smiled. "I wouldn't allow anything to happen to such a beauty." The girl blushed at these words. Meanwhile, Arod was already searching around for magical spheres. He found only one. It turns out this boy used magic twice, he thought. Touching his chin, the hero pondered. How are these fragments formed? Where do they come from? Probably everything happens by chance. The city buzzed around, full of noise. In such noise, it's hard to find a place where someone uses magic, the boy thought. He walked around several streets again but found nothing. I need a place where magic is really needed, Arod reasoned. And then one conversation came to his mind. In childhood, his mother warned him never to go into the forest. She said that terrible monsters lived there. Little Arod was only surprised then, because his mother said it with such tenderness. She shook her finger threateningly. "Do you understand me? Don't you dare even come close," she said. Coming out of his memories, the boy thought that this dangerous forest now sounded much more interesting than the boring city. Until now, he hadn't even approached those places closely. But now, when he knows how to use magic, can he not try? If he doesn't go, he'll never find out. And so he was walking the streets, heading to the outskirts. In an archway, he saw several people in black, and nearby lay the body of a man. They were discussing that if they had found out earlier, they could have healed him with magic. Everyone talks about miraculous power, but when it's needed, it's not there, they complained. Even a couple of resurrection spells would have helped, one exclaimed. Another immediately objected. Don't talk nonsense. That doesn't happen. Life is given only by God, Arod pondered. Once his own body was also powerless, and he had plenty of time for reflection. Does the magic of life exist? Is rebirth, resurrection possible? The world of sword and magic. A typical fantasy setting, he thought. But now I live in it, And the answers to these questions are no longer just interesting. They are important. There are graves, funerals, death here too. So the laws are similar to human ones. Good that I found out about this now, he decided. I need to be more careful. Crossing the road, the boy reached the edge of the forest. He inhaled the air. It was completely different. Fresh, heavy, and smelled of wet leaves. If not for his mother's prohibitions, he still would not have risked coming here without magic. But now Arod heard footsteps. Someone was approaching. His heart pounded, and without thinking, the boy dived into the bushes. Carefully peeking out, he saw a whole pack of beasts rush past him. There were many of them, and he even covered his mouth with his hand to avoid making a sound. But in a moment, the animals disappeared into the distance. They didn't even stop nearby. Damn, I almost scared my heart out, the boy thought, exhaling with relief. Suddenly, an image of his mother flashed in his mind. How she cries, calls his name. If I have already decided to live in this world, then I must achieve at least something, he thought. The hero moved further through the forest. Rustling was heard around, and he realized that now he needed to be extremely attentive. Arod became alert. It seemed that cries or the rumble of battle were heard nearby. Could someone really be fighting there? Flashed through his thoughts. Getting closer, the boy hid behind a thick tree. From there, he saw a huge monster moving among the trees and held his breath. In front of him, a real hunt was taking place. Several people were fighting a monster. Arod froze in delight. It looks like special effects from a movie, only too realistic. He saw one of the hunters use magic. A powerful flash, and the monster fell, showing no signs of life. Arod could not believe his eyes, but another monster immediately jumped into the place of the fallen one. The team acted in unison. One covered the other, repelling attacks, dodging almost at the last moment. The hero, watching the battle, sighed heavily. He even broke out in a sweat from the tension. And right then, he noticed a familiar glowing orb nearby. He looked around. Approaching closer, he touched the bullet. And suddenly, a feeling flashed in his head, as if a seal had been imprinted deep inside. Here it is. Now I understand how magic works, he thought, pleased with the risk. It was a huge progress, but it was already getting dark. The main thing is not to overwork, decided Arod. It's time to go back home. At that moment, he heard a quiet rustle behind his back. He turned sharply, but saw no one. His face grew serious, but he decided that he must have imagined it. Then he noticed a familiar magical glow flashed among the leaves. Arod looked closely and saw it really was a bullet. His mouth opened in surprise. He looked around carefully, made sure no one was nearby, and stepped closer. So here you are, Fragment, he whispered. The bullet seemed to pulse, ready to disappear at any moment. Arod stretched out his hand. There was no time to waste the chance. Barely touching with the tip of his finger, he felt a light breeze, and the bullet vanished, leaving behind a thin stream of wind. At that very moment, strange symbols, ancient, unknown, flashed in his mind. Arod felt his body weaken. He had received a fragment of ancient magic, the resurrection of the dead. Overwhelmed by the power, he fell to his knees. Resurrection of the dead flashed through the mind. Could this really be the same resurrection magic? How is this possible? Meanwhile, nearby, other people were examining a large crystal. One of them said enthusiastically that it was pure and almost flawless. The bald man added that finding such a specimen was a great rarity. The girl agreed. The third said that the find should be taken quickly to the guild to exchange. At that moment, Arod approached them and apologized for disturbing. The group looked at him in surprise. A boy in the forest? Are you lost, little one? They asked. Tell me, are there any mages among you? He asked. The bald man pointed to the girl. Here, she is a sorceress. The girl stepped closer. What happened, little one? She asked gently. Arod answered seriously that he wanted to ask something of the one who uses magic. Focusing, he raised his eyes. Do you know anything about ancient magic? He asked sincerely and attentively. Ancient magic? The girl repeated, then turned to her companions. They just shrugged. We hear about this for the first time. I heard in the city that one man said he possessed ancient magic, Arod explained. That's why I'm curious. Does it really exist? The men laughed. He was babbling. There are plenty of storytellers here. The girl also smiled. There are many different schools of magic, but I haven't heard of ancient magic. Sorry for the silly question, said Arod. No, it's okay, replied the sorceress. But you'd better return home. It's dangerous here. She even asked if she should escort him. But the boy, blushing, refused. No, I can manage on my own. He waved to them and walked away. Then he questioned a few more people, but everyone answered the same. No one had heard of ancient magic. Could it really not exist? He thought. Arod clenched his fists. If only I had Google now, he thought bitterly. With one click, I would know everything. How I miss the internet, he pondered. In any society, knowledge is power. And in this world, where information is inaccessible, it is valued even more. Returning home, the boy sat on the bench by the door. Maybe ancient magic really doesn't exist, he thought. At that moment, Robin came out of the house and asked what he was doing there. Arod looked at his brother. He looked exhausted, and it seemed had been drunk since lunch. The hero silently tried to find an answer to his question. What do you mean by ancient magic? Robin asked again, snorting and adding, You're talking nonsense again. Robin waved his hand disapprovingly. Stop fantasizing. What are you even talking about? I've never heard of any ancient magic before. Then he added instructively, Think less about nonsense and work more on yourself. Be like me. Arod just nodded. He didn't want to argue. The brother, pleased with himself, began to boast, saying that now he was a good friend of Kevin. And just then, someone called Arod by name. The boy turned around in surprise. Aria was standing in front of him. He exclaimed her name, confused. You, what are you doing here? The girl smiled. I came to show you something. That's why I'm here. Arod was even more surprised. Really? To show something? He immediately remembered their first meeting. At that moment, Robin grimaced and muttered, Hey, you two. You haven't thought of anything indecent, have you? Arod froze in astonishment, but the brother continued to talk nonsense. Even though you are still a boy, you are already doing such things. Arod just looked at him with confusion. Are you serious at all? And asked if he remembered Count Louis. Of course I remember. We recently visited him, replied Robin. The hero expected that he would guess who was in front of them, but the brother still did not understand. Arod only thought. Hopeless. He remembers the Count himself, but forgot the face of his granddaughter, he pondered. If Robin worked in an office, he would have been fired on the first day. He even felt a little sorry. But Aria seemed not to pay any attention to the brother's rudeness. It did not affect her for a moment. Arod thought it was good that she was not offended. But Robin is Robin, he sighed mentally. At that moment, a carriage approached them. Everyone looked around in surprise. Where did it come from? A smooth man in glasses jumped out of it and addressed Aria. Madam, you cannot be here alone. It's okay. I have magic, the girl replied with a smile. But the man said sternly, That won't help if something happens to you. What will I then say to the Count? Enough, Craig, said Aria, with slight annoyance. Don't make a fuss. At that moment, Robin finally noticed the Louis family crest on the carriage. He realized this girl really was a relative of the Count himself. Arod smiled mentally. Oh, finally got it. Slow as always. Robin instantly changed his tone, smiled charmingly, and said, Nice to see you, lady. He introduced himself and bowed politely. Aria looked at him confused. What exactly is going on? Then, remembering, she said, Ah, you are Arod's brother. Nice to meet you. After a short pause, Aria turned to the hero. Are you done with your brother? Yes, he replied. Then let's go. I really want to show you something, said the girl with a smile and stepped closer. Robin trembled with indignation. Aria stopped in front of Arod. Here, look. This is exactly what I wanted to show you, she said, and nodded to her companion. She uttered a short spell. Waves of energy appeared around her, and a glowing sphere formed in her hand. Arod, impressed, thought, is she really casting a spell right now? And indeed, the sphere burned a hole in the servant's fabric. Aria turned to Arod. So, how do you like it? She asked slyly. He was confused. What do you mean? The girl laughed. I thought you wanted to see more. But magic shouldn't be wasted, she said with a mysterious sparkle in her eyes. Arod thought she had clearly switched to weird mode. And also, she added seriously, you can't release all the power at once. The main thing is to learn to control it. The hero nodded. Yes, I understand. He looked at his palm. If you accumulate magic, it really becomes denser, more powerful, he thought. But he didn't finish the thought, because he was looking at Aria and caught himself thinking she looked simply perfect. Arod felt that she had tried very hard. All of this was for him. A small demonstration, but with great effort. He smiled. Wonderful. I wouldn't expect anything less from you. Aria looked sharply at him, her cheeks flushed. It's nothing special, she muttered, averting her gaze. Arod thought she was probably pleased to hear the compliment. Then he looked around. Strangely, where had Robin gone? He hadn't even noticed when he disappeared. At that moment, Aria stepped closer. If you want, I can teach you to do the same, she said with a smile. They both had already mastered fireballs, and now a new feeling of shared power flared between them. The main character felt a wave of nostalgia. He remembered his childhood days when he played with friends. Smiling, he said aloud that if it was not difficult for her, he agreed, and laughed. Suddenly someone called him by name. Arod and Aria simultaneously turned at the sound. It was Robin, and next to him stood some boy. Meet, Robin said solemnly. This is Kevin, the chief on Craftsman Street. He bowed politely but looked tense. Arod did not understand what was happening. What kind of performance is this? And why did his brother bring him? He thought, looking suspiciously at Robin. Then he shifted his gaze to Aria. A strange feeling of competition flared in his chest. Could it be he decided to compete with her? Arod thought. And looking at his brother, he understood. Yes, his facial expression gave him away completely. The hero silently watched everyone and wondered who would start showing off now, and why the atmosphere suddenly became so strangely tense. At that moment, another carriage arrived at the house. Everyone instantly turned around. The servant placed a stand in front of the door to make it easier for someone to get out. Out of the carriage stepped none other than Count Barton. The surrounding people froze. Robin turned pale, and Kevin muttered fearfully, "What is happening here?" The Count calmly scanned the crowd. "Oh, how many people have gathered?" Then he stopped at Robin. "You seem to be Arod's brother?" "Yes, my lord," he quickly replied. "Good," Barton nodded. "Keep up the good work." Robin was delighted by the praise, thanked him, and turning to Kevin, whispered, "Let's go." Stepping away, Robin cast an angry glance at Arod. The boy understood that it hurt his brother. He was called Arod's brother, twice, not the other way around. For the elder son, it was a real blow to his pride. Meanwhile, the Count glanced at everyone present and addressed Aria. "And what are you doing here, child?" "I came to talk with Arod. We both possess fireballs," she explained. The Count smiled. "Oh, so you also strive for improvement?" Arod thought. She seems to just want to show off. Then Aria herself asked her relative, "And why are you here today, grandfather?" The Count did not answer at first, but his gaze fell to the ground. Something caught his attention there. He bent down, noticed symbols drawn on the soil. "Who did this?" he asked. Arod answered honestly, "I did." The Count's face instantly grew serious. "And where did you get this knowledge?" he asked quietly, but with such pressure that the air seemed to become heavier. Arod felt he had come to the wrong people with his questions. Information is power, he thought. Aristocrats definitely know something. If he reacts like this, then he probably really heard about ancient magic. The Count's gaze became ice-sharp. Even Aria, standing nearby, felt the tension. "I will ask again," he said slowly. "How did you find out about this?" the Count repeated. Arod understood. Until he answered, he could not ask anything. It was pointless to lie to him. Such a pressing aura came from this man that it was hard even to breathe. "I better keep silent about the shards," the boy decided. "When I received magic, I heard a voice," Arod said cautiously. Inside, he felt guilty, as if confessing to a crime. The Count snorted. "A voice, you say? The voice of a deity?" Arod did not know what to answer, but thought, "Maybe everyone who receives power hears it? I was just lucky." "Yes, this voice told me about ancient magic," Arod quietly confirmed. The Count thoughtfully raised his head to the sky, rubbed his chin, and finally said, "I see." After that, he turned around and prepared to leave. Arod watched him with a surprised look. "Are you already leaving?" he asked timidly. "I didn't even have time to ask," thought the hero. The Count stopped. "This is not a 5-minute conversation. I will send you an official invitation." Then he looked straight at the boy. Arod did not look away and firmly replied, "I understand. It will be an honor." Next, the Count turned his gaze to Aria's servant. "So, this is your only companion?" he clarified. "Excuse me, my lord," Craig quickly replied, bowing. Aria immediately defended him. "My servant is excellent. There's no need to scold him. I acted selfishly. But he is not to blame," she began. But the Count interrupted. "I know, and I must admit, you are extraordinarily clever." Count Barton spoke sternly that they are aristocrats, and therefore must keep face and always look dignified. "Do you understand me, Aria?" he asked. The girl bowed her head. "Yes, my lord. We are born for status, not for carefree walks," the Count continued. "And we never go out without escort. Louis was very worried about you." Aria apologized again, a little embarrassed. At that moment, Arod noticed a familiar boy from the reception nearby. But the Count had already returned to his carriage, which moved off in a moment. When the hero looked again, the boy was gone. His attention was drawn to Aria. She stood sadly, and Craig was trying to comfort her. "Please, don't be sad, lady." Arod decided to intervene. He gently turned the girl toward himself. "You promised to teach me that magic, remember?" Aria barely smiled. "Yes, I already promised you that." She looked at her right hand. It seemed a little tired. But raising her eyes, Aria cheerfully asked, "So what exactly do you want to learn?" Arod realized he was wrong to think she was exhausted. For a moment, the boy imagined his family. Aria jokingly said, "I will teach even Dad." Her father laughed in response. "Will you really teach me to tie a ribbon?" "Of course. Everything is ready," she smiled. "Wonderful," the man replied. "Maybe you will teach Uncle too." "That's not Uncle. That's my brother," she corrected. Arod thought. Probably her father felt the same when she was teaching him. At that moment, Aria called Craig, and Arod pondered. "If you tilt the glass, the water will spill. The angle of tilt determines how much will flow out. The same goes for mana," the girl explained. "Imagine it as water. You control the flow. You control the power." Arod nodded. Understood. Like in the mangas I read in childhood, he thought. They were the textbook for this world. Meanwhile, Aria continued explaining the subtleties of control to him. She demonstrated the spell again. "Aren't you tired?" Arod asked. "No, magic doesn't tire you if you feel it," Aria smiled. "Now it's your turn." Arod inhaled and decided not to overexert himself, to stay calm, like during hunting. The main thing is not to overdo it, he thought. Focusing, the boy tried to direct the flow of power and weaken the strike, so that his shot would be weaker than Aria's. But something went wrong. The magic bounced back, creating a strange reverse flow. What is this? Did I do it too weakly? Arod was surprised. Aria quietly laughed. Don't worry. No one succeeds the first time. Her voice was warm, sincere. Arod thanked her and smiled too, looking at the joyful girl, he thought. Now everything is clear. She probably gets exhausted too. She just doesn't show it. He wondered why she was so happy. Probably, controlling magic creates a load on the magical circuits, he reasoned. The smaller the fire sphere, the faster the energy is spent. If you compress the power too much, the magic can't hold and bounces back. And suddenly the forest was pierced by Craig's loud scream. "Lady Aria, run!" The man fell right in front of them, unconscious. Aria jumped up. "Craig, what happened?" She rushed to him, but armed strangers were already standing around. "What are you doing?" the girl shouted. They ignored her. Only one said, "The boy matches the description. It's him." Aria tried to attack, but the magic did not work. Arod realized. The energy was exhausted. He managed to release only 2 bullets. The unknown began to recite a spell. "They are also mages," the hero realized, and instantly grabbed Aria's hand. "Let's run! He won't escape!" one of the attackers shouted. Another asked for permission to attack. Arod looked back. The sorcerer was already finishing the incantation. An explosion sounded, but the boy managed to push Aria aside. "This field is too open. We need to get to the forest," he decided. They, with Aria, rushed into the thicket. Behind them, one of the attackers muttered, "Be careful with the mage girl. We need the boy alive. If he dies, it's the end for us." Hiding behind a thick tree, Arod pressed Aria to himself and covered her mouth, gesturing, "Be silent." Above them, a wave of magic flew again. After a few minutes, one of the sorcerers sat down tiredly. How long can this go on? They are still alive. But suddenly, a huge, icy stream appeared before them. The attackers froze in surprise. "What the? Ice coffin!" one shouted. Aria, looking at Arod, could not utter a word, only opened her mouth wide in shock. A moment later, a wild scream of someone unknown sounded in the forest. Aria wanted to scream too, but Arod covered her mouth again, so as not to reveal their location. One of the mages looked back. "They can scream as much as they want. We will still find them by the sound." Then he stretched out his hand forward and again cast a spell, illuminating the darkness with a flash of magical light. At that moment, one of the enemy's shells exploded right nearby. The ground shook. Aria screamed in horror. A cry was already tearing from her chest, but Arod, gathering his last strength, covered her mouth again. "It's getting more and more interesting." The man in the hood laughed hoarsely, but immediately looked at his mage partner. "Don't get carried away. You're destroying everything around." The boy saw how flashes of magic were getting closer and closer. "Things are really bad," he thought, gritting his teeth. The attackers stood nearby, talking. They were sure that the pair would show themselves sooner or later. One of them muttered, "The boy is not dead. I can feel it." What to do, Arod thought. In Japan, they wouldn't have killed me. But here, everything is real. He was seized by cold fear. And then he noticed, nearby shone fragments of magical spheres. With his gaze, he tracked them, and realized there were dozens. Reflections of blue light shimmered in his eyes. Without wasting time, he crawled to them to collect at least some. Aria looked at him confused, not understanding what he was planning. Touching one fragment, the boy felt an echo in his head. Ice element fragment reached. Mastery. Complete. His heart pounded wildly. "This is my chance," the thought flashed. Arod suddenly stood up, put his hands forward, and began to recite a spell. Ice energy flared around. The enemies froze as a pillar of ice rose before them. "What is this?" one exclaimed. "He has the same magic as the mage?" "But he used fire," another shouted. Everyone looked bewildered. No one expected this. Arod took a deep breath, looked at Aria. "Let's run!" She didn't understand at first, but the boy grabbed her hand, and they rushed forward. "The forest is just like a garden. Everything will be fine," he exclaimed, trying to calm the girl. Aria squinted and asked, "Why are we running at all?" "Because I won't allow even a hair to fall from your head," he replied firmly. Behind them, shouts were heard. "Stop! Don't let them escape!" The people realized they had broken free and rushed after them. "Damn, we won't lose them in the forest," Arod thought, hearing the pounding behind. "They're already close," Aria shouted. At that moment, something rustled nearby. "There! To the right!" he shouted. The enemies ran after them, muttering that the boy and girl would soon be finished. Their strength would leave them, and then it would all be over. Aria, tearful, called his name, Arod, but he only smiled. "It's okay, don't be afraid." They broke out into a small clearing. "Hide behind those trees," he ordered, pointing with his hand. They pressed against each other in the shelter, trying not to breathe. When the girl whispered something, the boy put a finger to his lips. Quiet. The attackers came out onto the clearing. "Where did they go?" "They should be nearby," one muttered. They began to scour the area. Aria trembled, and Arod placed his hand on hers and quietly smiled, encouraging her. Suddenly, a strange noise sounded in the forest, followed by screams. "What is that?" The mages panicked. From the darkness emerged a huge creature. The attackers retreated in shock. "A monster? Are we on its territory?" "I didn't even know such creatures existed," one muttered. "Let's get out of here." But suddenly they noticed Arod and Aria. "Forget about them. Let's run before it's too late. This time he definitely won't escape," someone grumbled. But his partner barked back. "Fool! Do you want us to be torn apart? Get out of here!" And he himself fled. Meanwhile, Arod, not letting go of Aria's hand, rushed away from the battlefield. The girl looked at him. Her cheeks were flushed with a blush. Somewhere nearby, two unknown people were watching them. One of them quietly said, "The boy passed the test. He understood that he couldn't win. So he pretended to flee," replied the blonde one. "But in reality, he lured 3 enemies right into the monster's lair. People his age don't think like that." The dark-haired one added, "I doubt even an experienced adventurer would dare to do that." Then he stepped out of the shadows. It was the same man who had been at Count Barton's reception. The blonde man smiled. "Because of that boy's cleverness, we couldn't even show ourselves." "So what do we do now?" he asked. The dark-haired one, hanging upside down from a branch, replied, "You mean that same group, right? Let's go," said the dark-haired one, straightening up. "They're not that dangerous. The girl is unharmed, so we can return." "And that doesn't bother you?" the blonde asked again. "What exactly?" The partner didn't understand. "You don't understand what I mean," said the blonde. "That's exactly why I'm asking," replied the dark one. "What will happen when the Count asks who attacked his granddaughter?" The dark-haired one waved his hand. "She has herself to blame. She shouldn't have been walking without protection." "But they don't attack a child from an aristocratic family every day," the blonde objected. "You think the Count will just keep quiet? If he finds out who did it, we'll all be in trouble." Then the dark-haired one finally understood the meaning of his comrade's words. He jumped to the ground and said, "All right, I'm already on my way. You can't die without me." "By the way," shouted the blonde after him, "do you even know how many years ago the boy?" "I think about 6, replied the other, without looking back. "A 6-year-old outsmarted you in tactical thinking," sneered the light-haired one. "It's a coincidence," snapped the dark one. But his friend continued to laugh mockingly. The blonde sighed. "Funny boy, but dangerous." At that moment, Arod was still running through the forest, tense, out of breath, but alive. They returned to the clearing with Aria. Along the way, The ground was strewn with shards of ice, the consequences of his recent spell. Approaching the training spot, the girl immediately called out, "Craig!" and ran up to the lying servant. "Are you sleeping?" The man moved, lifting his head with difficulty. "Lady Aria, it's dangerous here. You need to run away." "Everything is fine. I'm okay," she assured, bending down to him. Craig looked around confused. It seemed he still did not understand what had happened. "What happened here?" he asked. Arod intervened. "It can still be dangerous here. Take her and leave immediately." His voice sounded firm. He looked toward the direction they had run from. "I wouldn't be surprised if those freaks come back. We need to go now." Aria called Craig again. He nodded. "He's right. Let's go, lady." "Yes, all right," she agreed, though reluctantly. Arod led them to the carriage. When they sat inside, he waved goodbye. The wheels had already started turning, but suddenly the carriage stopped abruptly. The door flew open, and Aria, gasping for breath, ran back out. "Aria!" he shouted. The girl stopped in front of him, catching her breath. "What happened?" the boy asked. She hesitated, nervously adjusted her hair, and quietly said, "I just wanted to thank you for saving me." Arod blinked in surprise. "She came back just to thank me?" he thought. "How proper. A true aristocrat. If I had a brother like that, I would cry with pride." He looked at Aria, who was standing, shifting from foot to foot. "What's wrong with you?" he asked aloud. Craig patiently waited by the carriage. Even the horse seemed tired of the scene. Finally, the girl, stammering, said, You are cool." Her face turned red up to her ears. Arod glanced at his dirty, torn clothes and laughed. "Cool? You mean this raggedy stuff?" "No, not that," Aria exclaimed, becoming even more embarrassed. She tried to explain, but he interrupted. "Ah, I get it. You're surprised that I'm so awesome?" Aria's face turned even redder. "What are you saying?" she exclaimed, looking away. "What's wrong?" he replied confusedly. "Wrong! Everything is wrong!" she shouted, stomping her foot. Arod didn't understand anything and tried to change the subject. "Hey, I was just joking." Aria looked at him angrily. "If you keep pretending to be so cool, you'll get into trouble. Be careful." Then she turned around, got into the carriage, and slammed the door. "Craig, go!" she ordered sharply. Arod watched her go and quietly thought, "She really is a true aristocrat. Even when she's angry, she won't say anything bad. How sweet she is." He caught himself treating her almost like a father would. When the carriage disappeared around the corner, the boy was left alone. He walked down the road, gazing into the distance. It seems those attackers are no longer chasing. Maybe the monster dealt with them instead of me. The main character recalled the face of that monster that attacked in the forest. If such a creature appeared on their path, he thought, then they definitely had no time for pursuit. After that, Arod looked doubtfully at his palm. Then he glanced around, making sure no one was nearby. "One thing surprises me," he thought. "Why do the local mages shamelessly cast spells right in the middle of people? Aren't they embarrassed? At school, this would look like child's play." Sitting on an old stump, he took a deep breath and began quietly uttering a spell, deciding to try the magic of the ice cliff. A small shard of ice appeared before him, only half a meter tall. "Is that all?" He was surprised. Those who attacked seemed to use something similar. He remembered a clearing strewn with ice shards and magical spheres. If you collect so many fragments, you can learn magic extremely quickly, the thought flashed. In his imagination, a battle scene unfolded. Explosions, magical projectiles flying in all directions, people defending themselves with swords, and monsters raging around. Amid this chaos stood he himself, raising his hand up, and around him swirled shining magical symbols and shards, like obedient stars. If you do it like this, you could collect as many fragments as you can fit, he thought. Only I wouldn't live long. It seems I am starting to fantasize even in a world that is itself a fiction. No, risking life is not allowed, he said firmly to himself. Even if ancient magic exists, even if I someday master resurrection magic, I won't be able to use it on myself. Healing and resurrection are different things, he pondered. But if such magic existed, it would be wonderful. Then he decisively dismissed these thoughts. Enough dreaming. Start with the basics. First, I need to consolidate what I already know, Arod thought. He was lucky that his power was connected with ice. Fire and ice are opposites, but both obey form. But ice, unlike flame, is solid, making it easier to control. He focused and began reading the spell again, imagining the form he wanted to create before him. Make it thinner, longer, stronger, he whispered. When he opened his eyes, instead of a sphere, an elongated silhouette appeared before him. It took some time, but the form changed. With practice, it will go faster, he thought with satisfaction. Suddenly, something troubled him. He couldn't understand what exactly, just a strange feeling. He stuck the created weapon into the ground and pondered. Arod looked at his hands. I need to reproduce the same flow of energy as before. He closed his eyes and began to intently recite the words, and now an ice sword appeared in his hand again. Time, he thought. That's what worries me. If I use mana correctly, everything should happen faster. Suddenly, he was struck by an idea. If the theory is correct, this might work. A thrill ignited in his chest. He recited the spell again, calling upon the power of the ice cliff. But this time, nothing happened. The air remained still. At that moment, two acquaintances approached him, a blonde and a dark-haired man. You're still here? They called out. The dark-haired one began to tell about a giant lizard that supposedly appeared in the forest. Then suddenly, the air around vibrated, and right before them, an ice sculpture materialized. Both froze, stunned. The created object clanged and fell to the ground before Arod. The boy himself did not understand what he had just done. Silence enveloped the clearing. Arod looked at the creation with disbelief, and the two men came closer. What was that? He realized they had seen everything. You just created a delayed spell? At your age? Exclaimed the dark-haired man, not believing his eyes. Who taught you this? He asked. Arod hesitated for a moment. He did not know what to answer. This is not child's magic, the boy thought. They were not supposed to see this. Maybe just keep silent? The dark-haired one was the first to conclude. So, no one taught you. You mastered the delayed spell yourself? Incredible. Arod tried to deny everything, but his voice betrayed a tremor. Are you joking? Such complex sorcery cannot be a coincidence, said the dark one. The blonde smiled. Boy, you have real talent. No, I was taught, Arod replied hastily. Lies, the dark-haired immediately contradicted. The boy hung his head. I see. You figured me out, poor thing, the dark one muttered contemptuously. But before he could finish, the blonde hit him with a fist on the shoulder. Shut up, fool! And silence fell again in the clearing. The light-haired man asked his friend. You behave like this because you yourself don't understand why? The dark-haired lowered his gaze and apologized to Arod. I didn't mean to offend you. His companion also apologized for him, adding, he didn't intend anything bad. He is just, sometimes, too frivolous. It's okay, Arod answered calmly. I'm not just poor, he thought. I'm terribly, ridiculously poor. The dark-haired suddenly suggested, as an apology, I'll teach you one technique. The light-haired raised his eyebrows in surprise. Are you serious? The dark one spoke a short spell. A symbol lit up before them, and he addressed the boy. Touch this, but carefully. Arod moved his hand closer. But as soon as his fingers touched the glowing circle, he was thrown back by an invisible wave. He recoiled, stunned. Well, did you feel it? Laughed the dark-haired one. "What was that?" asked the boy, still not understanding. "Are you teaching now, or just bragging?" The blonde interrupted, frowning. Arod pretended not to hear to avoid getting involved in their argument. "If you've decided to teach, explain properly," insisted the light-haired one. Then the dark one turned to Arod again. "All right, let's start from the beginning. This is a delayed spell. It doesn't activate immediately, but after some time. I just showed how it can be stopped before activation," he added. Arod repeated mentally. "So, it activates not by time, but by impulse." Suddenly it dawned on him. If you change the trigger condition, you can make the spell not temporary, but controllable. Turn it on or off as needed. Magic is like programming, he thought. Logic, conditions, triggers. It's like writing code. An interested smile appeared on his face. They continued the exercises. Arod admitted to himself that he was wrong. "I thought he was a braggart, but actually he teaches excellently. Being the head of the clan is not just empty titles." The light-haired one looked at Arod and said, "You concentrate mana incredibly well." The boy apologized. "Maybe I held it too long." "It's nothing. I'm just impressed," he replied. "Are you not overworked? Is your mana all right?" Then he leaned closer. "By the way, can I ask you something? Is it true that those 3 weird ones attacked you?" he asked. Arod nodded. "And do you know who they are?" he continued. The boy thought, and realized he had no idea. "No," he answered honestly. Both men exchanged glances and barely smiled. "Why did they attack me specifically?" Arod asked quietly. "Count Barton ordered us to stay and watch over the girl," explained the dark-haired one. The boy understood. That's why they were nearby then. "So, they are also under the Count's supervision," he thought. "Don't those people remind you of someone?" the blonde asked. Arod shook his head. "No." "Understood," they said simultaneously. "By the way, it's already getting dark." The dark-haired one stood up. "Well then, we will go. Take care, Arod." "By the way," his companion added, "I'm an aristocrat too, just so you know." Then the dark one smiled. "And now, you are my good student." "I understand," replied the blonde with a playful smile. They said goodbye and went deeper into the path, waving their hands to him. Arod thought, "I should thank them properly next time." Then he resumed training. "This is the hardest task I have ever faced," he admitted aloud. Every attempt to improve the results seemed futile. He was not sure if he was doing everything correctly at all. "I'll have to learn by practice," the boy decided. The sun was already setting, and he hoped it would be safer in the dark. He planned to use the created object as a trap. If everything worked out, he would get proof that the technique works. For a trap, you can't find a better spell, Arod thought, activating the magic again. He was eager to see how it would look from the side. However, when he stepped back and looked at the installation spot, he realized he had chosen a bad position. "I need to place it a little differently," he decided, but already better than last time. The boy was convinced that if the magic was set up correctly, it would not turn off by itself. Smiling with satisfaction, he felt true pride in his success. Seeing the result, Arod was delighted. "What a growth! At this rate, I can earn a whole fortune," flashed through his mind. Walking down the street, he thought that he should buy some kind of gift, maybe something for the family, or as a memento of his first serious success. The young man asked in surprise why no one had returned home yet. It turned out that this was a device for detecting people using magic. The hero explained, "When a pulse is sent to the input, a small fireball triggers, and the candle in the bowl lights up, signaling that someone has entered or exited." But something was wrong. Arod frowned. The switch worked strangely. It did not respond at all. The man noted in surprise that the candle did not even light up. Strange. Everything worked yesterday. The hero checked the switch and noticed that there were no signs of activation. "I installed it this morning," he thought. Where did the magic go? It occurred to him that maybe some anti-spell had been cast on him. Did someone deliberately turn off my magic? A troubling thought flashed. Yes, it was done on purpose, he decided, and the feeling of alertness sharply increased. What if it was aimed specifically against me? At that moment, a woman greeted. "Good morning, Robin." The boy grumbled. "Black bread again. Isn't there at least some wheat bread?" The maid apologized. "Unfortunately, the bakery only has this today." Robin frowned, displeased. "It tastes bad." Robin has become selfish, someone present thought. Probably because he was an only child for a long time. There was a knock at the door. Everyone was surprised. Who could have come so early? Arod became alert. Probably because of yesterday's, he thought, and mentally prepared himself. The maid apologized and left, saying they were having breakfast. A male voice behind the door asked, "Is this Mr. Ver?" The woman confirmed, then asked who he was. The guest in black clothes bowed. "Sorry for not introducing myself earlier. I am a representative of Count Barton." Robin immediately rejoiced. "Oh, this is a messenger from the main estate. He probably came for me." The father said sternly, "Calm down." Arod thought, "So this is what the true heirs of a great family look like." The messenger politely introduced himself. "My name is Ryan. I am the house manager. Sorry for the son's behavior," he addressed the head of the family. "But may I ask what we owe the visit to?" "I have come to fulfill Sir Barton's promise," the messenger replied. "This is an official invitation for young Arod from the Count himself. We must leave immediately. We should not keep the noble guest waiting," said the father. "I am ready," the boy responded. The messenger apologized. "Unfortunately, the carriage could not reach the village due to technical malfunctions. We will have to walk part of the way." "That's okay, I can manage," Arod replied. "Gentlemen, please stand up," said the Count's representative. The boy apologized, awkwardly asking if he needed to take off his shoes before entering. He only smiled. "Don't worry, it's not necessary." Ryan noticed that his brother looked very irritated. "He worries too much about everyone around," said the messenger. "I wonder why." Arod realized, he is watching me closely. This man is not as simple as he seems. "As a representative of the Count, I came without guards," said Arod. This could have irritated my brother. "You are perceptive, as they said," the man replied approvingly. "But if he had attacked me then, it would have caused a lot of problems," joked Arod, trying to ease the tension. Then he added, "Still, I'm sure there are guards nearby." "The whole estate is talking about you," said the envoy. "Everyone is surprised that you haven't become arrogant, even though you gained magic at such a young age. Count Barton had good reason to want to meet you. Do they really praise me that much?" The boy was surprised. It hadn't even occurred to him that rumors about him had already spread. Then the Count's envoy, Count Spotler, addressed him. "Perhaps I am too bold, but I have a request on behalf of my lord. You are still young, Arod, but don't forget, you are already an aristocrat." The envoy emphasized, "Behave according to your status in front of others, Arod." The boy bowed his head. "Sorry, I understand." Inside, he thought that this was a heavy burden, especially for a former Japanese, raised in a strict hierarchical system where everything was determined by seniority and work. The carriage turned onto another road. "We are entering a toll road," said the coachman, the butler explained. This road was built by Count Barton himself together with merchants. It is created exclusively for horse transport. The passage is paid, but in return, the road is constantly maintained in proper condition. Arod opened his eyes wide. This is a real expressway. How could he have taken on such a project himself, which is usually funded by the state, he thought. But probably, for aristocrats, nothing is impossible. The manager asked, "How did you notice that?" "You have excellent observation skills." "Let's stop for a minute," Arod quietly requested. "Stop the carriage," repeated the butler. The wheels creaked. The horse stopped. The main character looked around in surprise. Could all this really be the result of just one magic? He saw how the shining shards of invisibility around him reached their peak. "I have mastered it. The magic of invisibility," flashed through his mind. But I haven't even told everything, he whispered quietly, feeling that there was something more hidden in this power. Suddenly, barely noticeable lines appeared on his palms, similar to those he had seen on other people. He looked at his hands in surprise. His body was changing. Where does this magic come from? It is different from all the previous ones. He pondered, trying to understand its nature. What happened? Asked the butler, noticing that the boy looked as if his dream had just come true. Nothing special, Arod replied, hiding his excitement. Inside, he thought, I dreamed of such magic. If I continue learning at this pace, I will quickly exceed the age limit. After all, magic is usually obtained only during the baptism ritual on the birthday. Theoretically, it is impossible to obtain more than 7 magics before 6 years old, he reasoned. But if you use invisibility, you can even change the external appearance of magic. The journey passed quickly. They arrived at the estate before sunset. Arod noticed the place where the carriage stopped and said, There seems to be something hidden there. He carefully observed his companion's reaction and understood from his eyes. Indeed, there was something. When they entered the estate, the boy was struck by the luxury. I understand everything, he whispered. But such wealth hurts the eyes accustomed to poverty. The maids bowed, and one of them said, Allow some tea, sir. This is the second quality grade from our own plantations. Second? Arod asked, surprised. The girl shyly looked away. Sorry, I did not mean that. She bowed apologetically. I'm just too excited to meet someone I've heard so much about. About me? The boy was surprised. Yes, the maid confirmed. The whole estate talks about you. Everyone knows about your success and dreams of seeing you with their own eyes. Another maid quickly intervened. We apologize for the younger one's rudeness, sir. She simply couldn't contain her joy. Arod just smiled. It became clear to him that this was no coincidence. If the Count does not object, I do not mind meeting the rest, he said calmly, recalling the butler's words about dignity. He is even better than they said about him, the maids whispered to each other. Arod thought wearily. This formal tone exhausts me. I'm not an actor to constantly keep up a pose. Nearby he noticed an old man. Who is this? He asked. My name is he replied. I am just a guest. You are so young and so innocent. Funny guy, continued, in every move of yours politeness. Arod introduced himself and asked in surprise, Why funny? It is clear that this politeness is not part of aristocratic upbringing. It is in you by nature, explained He added that this is exactly what makes him funny. The boy recalled how in the past world he was praised for politeness during business meetings with foreigners, and now, in the new world, he is told the same. The hero asked what he wanted. The old man remembered and replied that he wanted to talk about what the boy had asked the butler Joseph. Arod clarified if it was about the road. The old man asked how he guessed that the butler Joseph was hiding something. The boy replied that he was looking for traces of used magic, and from the moment he mentioned it to the butler, he already knew what answer he would get if asked. The bald man was surprised by what he saw. The boy decided that hiding and hesitating was not the best idea, so he just needed to tell the truth. The man noted that such an ability is rare and almost never encountered. He asked if the boy also sees it. The boy leaned down and noticed the traces near his feet. The character grinned, adjusted his glasses, and said that he could really see them clearly. A bearded man addressed the old man, asking what he thinks. Replied that this child sees magical traces and even guesses what he was deliberately not told. He praised the boy, calling it a good job. The old man laughed and said it was nothing special. He suggested to the boy to talk sometime later, and he gladly agreed. The man looked out the window, thoughtfully asking himself if it was there. He hesitated whether it was intentional negligence or a simple mistake, recalling that he had suspected problems in the construction work for some time. The boy thought in surprise that it was precisely in that place that the remnants of invisibility magic remained. The man explained that if these were just rumors, he would not have paid attention, But since it was about the magic of concealment, he decided to entrust the investigation to specialists. He praised Arod, saying that he did the right thing. The boy shyly thanked him. The character noted that Ver had raised him well and invited him to sit down. Arod thanked him, and sitting down, wondered what had prompted the man to ask that question. He replied that he had become cautious now, because every thoughtless step could ruin his father's reputation. Another character noted his mature reflections, but did not finish the sentence, and the child remarked that he had the complete opposite. He recalled how he was previously explained what it means to be an aristocrat. From birth, they bear the name of their family, and every step they take is honor and glory to the house, the land, and the people they care for. The man added that even after death, this would not change, and reminded him not to forget this. Arod thanked him for the treat. Then the character suggested moving on to the main topic of the day. He had a key question and asked the boy if he knew his title. The boy guessed it was Sir Barton, but the Count corrected him, explaining that it was only a family name. He said that now he was often called Count Barton, although originally the title sounded differently. The main character nodded, as if to say he understood. It was noted that in Japan many families take names from places, like the Date family from the Sendai Principality, rulers of the lands of Sendai. Arod apologized, admitting that he had never heard anything like that before. The Count explained that he ruled the county of the Meteor Strait. The hero thought excitedly that such a name would be useful in battles with bosses. The man said that it was an ancient magical name, and the boy asked in amazement what it meant. Barton was surprised, and the boy shyly explained that he thought it was some kind of cool magic and was embarrassed by his reaction. The character suggested returning to the story. He explained that all current titles of counts and dukes are actually connected to the names of ancient spells that once existed. The boy began to understand what it was about. The man added that now it had lost its meaning, and few, upon hearing meteor strike, would guess that it was ancient magic. The main hero approached Sir Barton and asked if there was something he guarded as the Count of Meteor Strike. The boy assumed that if such a place existed, it was probably connected to the key to ancient magic. The master confirmed that such a place existed, and Arod joyfully exclaimed, "Bingo!" The boy asked excitedly where it was located. The man just laughed, and the boy immediately apologized, fearing he had behaved rudely. The Count calmed him, saying that there was nothing wrong with curiosity, and noted that the boy had an extraordinarily inquisitive mind. The man thought it was a great opportunity and wanted to show him that place, but the boy cautiously asked if it was even possible. He explained that the title, Lands and Meteor Strike, were entrusted to him by the monarch himself, so he could not make decisions independently. However, he asked for a few days for permission, which greatly surprised Arod. The Sir promised to obtain official permission, but for now ordered to stay at the estate, and asked if they agreed with this decision. The boy gladly agreed and thanked him. Deep down, he thought that perhaps this place was connected to the magic of Meteor Strike. The hero realized that the title of Count was not just a rank, but the name of ancient magic. It turned out that his guesses were not so absurd after all. He even felt as if he was living in a real computer role-playing game. When there was a knock at the door, the boy was surprised who it could be. 3 maids entered the room and informed him that the Count had ordered them to take care of him. The boy was confused, noticing that the girls were still very young. One of them was even the same height as him. She shyly said that she would be glad to help. The hero did not know how to behave and asked the girls why they had come. One of them explained that they were supposed to take care of him, so he could confidently turn to them with any request. The boy understood that they were simply waiting for his instructions. Arod inquired whether a room had been prepared for him. The girl confirmed and invited him to follow her, and he thought that maybe he could finally be alone. It seemed strange to him that ordinary things in this world were so unusual. Suddenly, one of the maids stumbled and fell, and another immediately began scolding her, demanding that she get up. The little servant apologized, but the elder did not stop and continued to reproach, pointing with her hand to the hero's room. Embarrassed, The maid served the boy tea. One of the servants remarked to another that the teapot handle should have been on the opposite side. The man nearby angrily scolded another, asking if he understood his fault. When the latter tried to apologize, the man only shouted for him to be quiet and complained about his indifference. The character coldly asked to bring the bill. The boy timidly asked if he could ask a question. One of the maids nodded and inquired what had happened. He wondered why they shouted so often in his presence and asked if they allowed themselves such behavior in front of others. Arod noticed that the girls at first pretended not to hear him, but then immediately apologized, assuring that they meant no harm. The boy calmly said that they could be free, but asked one of them to stay when the elder was already leading the rest out. The man asked if they had any objections, but the frightened maids quickly replied no, and apologizing, hurried to leave. He wondered if he had acted too arrogantly, like a true aristocrat. Remembering how he once suffered from constant criticism himself, he regretted snapping at them. He even felt that now he was beginning to understand Robin. Restraining oneself turned out to be extremely difficult. The girl quietly apologized, but he gently said it was all right, and asked to prepare black tea because his throat was dry. The maid quickly rushed to fulfill the request, and he advised not to hurry, but to do everything calmly. The boy added that if a mistake can be corrected, it simply needs to be fixed. After a short pause, the girl quietly agreed. He asked if she was new. She replied that she had been working here since last year, and the boy noted that she was still very young. Arod said he understood her, because the first year is always the hardest. He recalled how he once had an annoying boss and was constantly nervous due to high demands. The hero thought that later he began to better coordinate subordinates, trying not to ask unnecessary questions and not to pressure them. The boy smiled and said not to pay attention. Tasting the tea she brought, he sincerely thanked her and noted that everything was simply wonderful. The young man thought that the point of being a beginner is to learn, not to fear mistakes. He did not understand why people so easily forget what it is like to start from scratch. The girl, gathering courage, asked why he was so kind, but suddenly fell silent. The boy noticed that she had become a bit braver and sincerely hoped that her fear would disappear over time. The action shifts to the next morning. Waking up with back pain, the hero realized he had become too accustomed to sleeping on the floor. His body no longer accepted the soft bed. He looked out the window, surprised by the noise outside. In the yard, he noticed a bustle among the maids who were actively discussing something. The senior maid approached and apologized for the noise, explaining that the culprit was the same girl who had taken care of him yesterday. She reported that today is that girl's birthday, and by divine revelation, she received a magical gift. This greatly surprised Arod. The girl tried to smooth his hair, but her hands trembled with excitement, and the hero himself could not calm down from the surprise. The hero clarified if her name was Clax, and the head maid confirmed it. Meanwhile, another girl also tried to comb his hair, but she failed. The boy inquired whether the girl was still in the temple. He was told that she had already returned to the estate, but did not yet know what kind of magic she had received. Arod sincerely hoped that her strength would be a blessing for her, as she was serious and hard-working. However, another maid muttered skeptically that this intrusive girl was unlikely to be lucky. The young man asked where Clax was now. The woman said she would take him to her and ordered the other to go to Joseph. She looked confused, but agreed. The boy clarified if it was about the same butler who brought him. The maid confirmed and added that Joseph sometimes gives them lectures. He asked if that man was strict because it was hard to imagine him as stern. The girl replied that if they diligently do their work, he treats them well, and the boy saw sincerity in her eyes. At that time, the young lady invited him to go into the yard. Arod thanked for the help, but his friend smiled and jokingly ordered him to stop behaving so politely. The boy asked if he had heard about the girl who received magic. Hearing confirmation, he suggested going to see. The friend explained that she really received magic, but so far had not been able to correctly use a spell even once, although everyone tried to help her. The hero asked how many times she had already tried. The friend replied that since she returned, she has not stopped trying. The friend asked why he was so worried about her. Arod replied that nothing special. He just remembered the old man's words about how he once guessed about the failed magic. He recalled how said that a failed spell leaves fragments behind, and he realized that those fragments he could not collect were the remains of failed charms. The hero thought that he still did not understand the nature of the appearance of these fragments. But looking at the girl, he could not understand why, despite all her attempts, not a single fragment appeared. Someone called the boy, naming him the youngest of the Count's family. The man nearby added that Arod was his student, and for some reason, this caused the hero a bad feeling. The friend jokingly pushed him toward the girl, saying, "Go already." The boy was internally offended. After all, inside he was an adult. But they sent him as if he were a little boy. Approaching Clax, he thought that he himself would probably also smile watching such a scene from the side. He greeted the girl, wished her good morning, and sincerely congratulated her on her birthday. The girl shyly thanked him. The boy asked what kind of magic she had received, but she replied confusedly that she did not know yet. The hero said with interest that he would also like to try her strength. The maid shyly admitted that she had never succeeded even once, and was afraid of making a mistake. Arod understood that it was precisely the fear of making a mistake that prevented her from acting. The girl denied it, but he felt that was why the fragments never appeared. The young man reminded her of his words said earlier. If a mistake can be corrected, it just needs to be corrected. He confidently said that she would be able to change everything. The girl gathered her courage and decided to try again, this time for him. She pronounced the spell, and shining sparks flared around her, smoothly swirling in the air. The hero recalled that before his transformation, he had spent over a quarter of a century playing games. As an avid gamer, he always believed that the key in any role-playing game was teamwork, and therefore he most often chose the mage class. He explained that he used to be a buffer mage who helped others in battle, saying that a buff is a temporary enhancement of allies' attributes through magic, which often determines the outcome of a fight, and those who cannot use such spells are still far from being true masters. The boy noticed that the girl cast the spell specifically on him, but he did not feel any changes. He assumed that it might have been healing magic or some kind of enhancement. Clax explained that her power is speed magic, but the hero did not feel that he himself started moving faster. But suddenly he realized her spell did not speed up his movements, but accelerated the time of casting magic. The girl modestly remarked that her magic was not important at all, but the boy passionately objected. He explained that he always played as the buffer, and knows well how decisive speed can be in battle, so its power is truly incredible. The young man enthusiastically declared that such magic is one of the most valuable. His friend supported him, confirming that this power is truly strong. It was noted that such unique magic could become the core of any defense, and the Count would gladly pay 50 times more for it than for an ordinary maid. The old man noted with surprise that many children with magical abilities were born this year. At that moment, a friend called Arod. A girl approached them, whom the boy immediately recognized. It was Aria. She greeted politely, and he, a bit embarrassed, responded to the greeting. The boy asked why she was here. Aria explained that her grandfather had entrusted her to deliver something to Sir Barton. He joked that she looked as if she had come just to him. The girl became embarrassed and blushed deeply, and the boy, seeing her reaction, guessed that he had hit the mark. The hero asked if she was all right. Embarrassed, Aria indignantly demanded to know who the other girl beside him was. The boy explained that she is the mansion's maid. Today is her birthday, and she has just received her own magic, so everyone gathered to congratulate her. Aria asked the maid's name. She shyly introduced herself as Clax. She was glad that Miss Aria spoke to her herself and said that she had seen her at the celebration. The maid added with enthusiasm that Aria is very brave and beautiful. In response, Aria smiled and suggested training together, since both have a magical gift. The boy gladly supported the idea, noting that Aria was more experienced, so she could become an example for Clax, her senior mentor in magic. Both girls pondered these words. The adults watched them with curiosity, expecting to see what would come of it. The boy encouraged Clax, and she, smiling shyly, promised to try. The young man thought that the girl was kind and hard-working, and it seemed she liked being praised. The interior courtyard of the estate was shown. The hero pondered that even her family's title probably originated from ancient magic. Arod asked whom she herself would choose. The man nearby replied that it is never too late to learn the true manners of an aristocrat. Another girl quietly remarked that he was exceptionally mature for his age. Count Barton approached them, noting that it seemed very fun here. Those present politely greeted him. He praised Clax for her efforts, then addressed Arod, telling him to prepare. The permission had finally been granted. The hero was glad to learn that he would finally set off to the meteorite crash site. He wondered if Aria could go with them, since that required the king's own permission. The count reassured him, explaining that their families had long been acquainted, and thanks to their status, they preserved hereditary rights. However, the children did not quite understand what was meant. Then, the count asked Aria to tell the hero about her title Managuler. The boy guessed that it was probably magic for mana restoration. The young man recalled that in the world of games, there were always few ways to restore mana, so such ancient magic was a true rarity. At that moment, the count inquired if he now understood. The man addressed the girl, asking if she continued training, but advised not to overexert herself. She replied that the headmaid had given her a day off. The girls yawned tiredly, reflecting on the words they had heard. Clax recalled her desire to work even harder. Sir Barton asked Arod, on the way in the carriage, to explain to Aria the meaning of noble titles. The boy began to explain, reminding Aria that her family's title is Managuler, and asked if she knew what title a count holds. The girl answered correctly, Meteor Strike. The hero confirmed and explained that all these titles originate from the names of ancient magic that once existed in this world. He added that it was incredibly cool, although nowadays these spells are considered lost. The count agreed, nodding with a slight sadness in his voice. Aria guessed that this ancient magic is connected to the place they are currently heading to. The boy confirmed. It was there that the legendary meteor strike once occurred. The young aristocrat was surprised and said that after returning, she would definitely ask her grandfather if there is a place connected to their family magic. Arod thought that she hadn't even considered whether she could use it on her own. The hero recalled how the count asked where he got information about Aria, although he himself did not mention her. It occurred to him that in this world, magic is considered a divine gift. And, like a true otaku, he was filled with the desire to gain a similar power, since they were heading exactly to the place where this legend began. Then the boy addressed Sir Barton, as if remembering something. He asked the count if he had heard about magic capable of resurrecting the dead. The man replied that such power belongs to the title of Duke. The young man immediately understood that the Duke ranks higher than the count, and quickly asked if there is a place associated with this magic. Barton replied no, explaining that a duchy unites several counties, so dukes do not directly govern specific lands. The boy wondered why then he found a fragment of resurrection magic in the forest. At that moment, Aria suddenly remembered that she had recently learned a new skill. She said that she almost forgot. It was thanks to this new ability that she ended up next to them. Arod slightly doubted her words about the mission, but the girl asked permission to show something to Sir Barton, and he agreed, suggesting they stop for a rest. When Aria tried to use magic, a sharp crack sounded in the air. The boy asked anxiously if everything was all right, and the count noted that the spell seemed too complex. He calculated that she had already tried about 10 times, and warned that excessive attempts could disrupt the mana flow. But the girl, tired yet confident, said that this time it would work. Suddenly she exclaimed joyfully that she succeeded, and showed a small bird made of flame. The count enthusiastically called it a wonderful firebird, while the boy stood stunned. He could not believe that something tangible could be created from formless fire. He was impressed by how Aria, using only fire magic, managed to give it shape, and it sincerely inspired him. The hero thought that only a child is capable of such flexible thinking and pure imagination. He also realized, even having an idea, one must put in an incredible amount of effort to turn it into reality. The young man said it was really cool, just as he expected. The girl, hearing his praise, beamed with joy. The Count praised Aria, noting that few mages can so skillfully control power. He added that her grandfather Louis would be delighted. The girl shyly admitted that she had not told him about it yet, and decided to show the new skill when she returned home. The gentleman with a slight smile laughed at her embarrassment, then asked if she could make the bird fly. Aria confidently answered, "Chimanti, we fortatas, yes." The firebird rose into the air, but dissolved into smoke after a few seconds, which puzzled Aria. Sir Barton calmly noted that she still had too little firepower and asked if everything was all right. The hero assured that this was completely normal, as a flying fiery creature is much more impressive than an ordinary ball of flame. Both the Count and Aria agreed with him. However, the young man thought that the Count was right. The little bird is weaker than a real fire charge. It can scare the enemy or set grass on fire, but in a real battle, strength is needed. The boy reproached himself for once, considering only the external effect or power as important. He realized that by focusing only on knowledge, he was limiting his own possibilities. The Count suggested that Aria teach him the same art, as it is not worth thinking that strength and beauty cannot be combined. The girl was delighted and agreed, but warned that it was very difficult. The mage explained that imagining water or sand in the palm makes it easier to understand how to control the flow of magic. The girl nodded approvingly, and he decided to try. The result exceeded all expectations. The flash was powerful and clear. Aria exclaimed in surprise, and the boy himself could not believe that he managed it immediately. The Count, observing, only quietly laughed with interest. The Count laughed, called what he saw wonderful, and advised Aria not to stop at what had been achieved. The boy thought that he himself still needed to train, not suspecting that at that very moment Clax's life was in danger. Aria enthusiastically noted that the figures made of ice looked very funny, and the Count praised them, saying they were executed remarkably skillfully. The young man thought that doing such things inside the carriage was dangerous, as forming ice is much more difficult than controlling flame. The girl explained that if it is not possible to create a complex shape, it is worth simply imagining something simpler. She shared that her teacher advised imagining a paper bird. It helps to concentrate. The boy immediately understood that it was about magical origami. He thought that he himself could try to create something similar. An interesting idea came to his mind, and even if it seemed like a trick, it did not stop him. The hero decided that, using Aria's technique with the firebird, it was possible not only to attack, but also to enhance spells. But doing this openly now was too risky. Then he suggested trying to combine invisibility. First create a fireball, and then cast a concealment spell on it to turn it into a bird. The boy thought that the new magic could be disguised as a regular fireball. This was truly a cool use of invisibility. But the question arose, how to use two magics at the same time. He thought that maybe he just needed to imagine the fireball in one hand and the invisibility in the other. But suddenly the young man staggered and fainted. The frightened Aria leaned over him, asking what had happened. The Count calmly explained that this was a typical manifestation of exhaustion from excessive use of magic. He added that this happens when a mage spends too much energy. He advised Aria to be more careful, and emphasized that complete mana exhaustion was the worst thing that could happen. Sir Barton also addressed Arod, asking him to be attentive to his condition. The boy apologized for making him worry. He wondered if this meant that he simply did not have enough mana, and that using two spells simultaneously was still unattainable. The young man felt despair. If so, his perfect plan was ruined. But the Count smiled, and said that even in this there was beauty. For a moment, before the energy completely left the boy, a magnificent firebird appeared in the air, shining like dawn. The Lord seriously warned Arod to refrain from reckless experiments until his body learned to withstand the flow of magic. The boy agreed, deciding not to worry the Count anymore. He also realized how dangerous exhaustion was. Aria gently asked him not to move and to rest. When they finally arrived, the girl exclaimed with delight at the beauty around. The young man was also impressed by the view. A blue lake stretched out before them, shining as if alive. He noted that the water looked more like thick paint than a reflection of the sky, and asked the Count if this place was connected to a meteorite impact. The Count pointed to the island in the middle of the lake. Aria suggested going there, and the boy eagerly agreed. The young man impatiently asked what awaited them. Their ruins, treasures, or perhaps an ancient dungeon. But Sir Barton only smiled and replied that there was nothing on the island except grass. The boy did not believe it. A place associated with ancient magic could not be empty. He was haunted by the feeling that something greater was hidden here. Suddenly, Aria screamed, pointing forward. The statue fell. When the boy asked again, she, turning pale, shouted for him to look. The heroes shouted in unison, "This is magic!" Before them, the statue came to life, enveloped in a dark glow resembling smoke. The young man stood in complete shock, not believing his own eyes. Understanding the danger, the Count shouted for everyone to flee, leaving Arod in a stupor. Sir Barton, however, did not back down. He loudly declared that he was not a weakling and was not going to give up. Having caught his breath, the heroes rushed to him, asking if he was okay. The Count replied that everything was fine, although his appearance said otherwise. He noted that the statues had used magic, and now everyone was looking at them. So he concluded they were standing right at the epicenter of the meteor strike. It is told that the Count had never heard of anything like this before. They assumed that the target of the attack was the bridge, although surprisingly, it remained undamaged. It was also said that the gazebo, once built by the family of the landowners, was destroyed by a powerful storm. The young man guessed that this bridge and the moving statues form a place connected with ancient magic. The Count explained that the reason for the strange zigzag shape of the bridge has remained a mystery for many years. Arod agreed. The bridge really had a strange construction, and he simply could not understand why it was built so inconveniently. Sir Barton recalled one of the hypotheses. Supposedly, the bridge was deliberately made broken to stop a runny nose, which can only move straight. The main character skeptically thought that this was more likely a scary story for children than the truth. He admitted that he still does not understand why this place is considered connected with ancient magic, and suggested that it might all be a trap. The boy realized that crossing such a bridge during a meteor shower was a deadly adventure. So the bridge itself might have been created as a protective measure. The Count decided that this was enough for today. He stated that after everything seen, the area needed to be studied more thoroughly. The man added that they could not be sure how safe the island was, and suggested returning to the estate as soon as possible. Aria agreed, thinking that it was not worth risking with the children in a place where it was unknown what might happen. The Count turned to Arod, asking if he would help the girl. He firmly replied that as a man, he considers it his duty to protect her, even at the cost of his own life. Sir Barton nodded approvingly, and added that if his friend's granddaughter got into trouble, he would find no excuse. The young man did not understand why the Count was talking about this right now, when they needed to think about how to get out of the dangerous place. Suddenly, the man grabbed the children and shouted that he was counting on him. Arod did not even have time to realize what was happening. The boy was shocked. The Count seemed to have abandoned them, but he quickly understood that he was just distracting the danger so they could cross the lake faster and avoid a new meteorite strike. During the flight, Arod shouted to Aria to hold on tighter. The girl was scared and did not know what to do, overwhelmed by panic. The young man remembered the Count's words about a man's duty, to protect the girl even at the cost of his life. And at that moment, he made a decision. The hero decided to take the impact upon landing himself, and began preparing magic to soften the fall. Arod created a long, icy slide, down which they safely slid. He was satisfied with the result, and Aria and the Count's companions were stunned. The Count's companions noted that the icy path looked too simple compared to Aria's firebird. They also remarked that without the Lord, they would have to cross the dangerous bridge again. Arod thought that he was not as simple-minded as he seemed, and wondered if he should use magic again. Sir Barton thanked the young man for saving Aria. The Count laughed, adding that his back was stuck from sudden movements. The boy smiled, thinking it was like a light jog. The Count noticed that his magical energy had been restored, and noted that the young man really surprised him. He admitted that he had planned to involve his companions for help, and did not expect this from Arod. The boy realized that, at that moment, the Count's companions were already ready to enter the fight and cover them. The Count said that now it does not matter. All objectives are completed. He ordered an immediate retreat because no one knows what might happen next. Leaving, the young man still could not understand what had happened. But he was sure a fragment of ancient magic flared in the sky for a moment. When they returned to the estate, they were met by a frightened maid, who reported that a misfortune had occurred. Clax had fainted. The girl said with fear that her life is now in danger. This news stunned the children. Hearing the news, Arod immediately rushed to Clax. Other servants and adventurers had already gathered near her room. Seeing him run, everyone stepped aside. The boy asked about her condition, and when he heard she was with the doctor, he wanted to rush there immediately, but he was stopped. Arod looked at his comrades with surprise. They explained to him that it was better not to see what had happened to the girl. The young man was frightened, briefly thinking that she might have turned into something inanimate, but internally rejected this thought. One of the adventurers insisted that Ari should show the state Clax was in. He said it would be fair, but his companion sharply opposed this idea. The man added that the boy sometimes behaves recklessly himself, so he needs to see what happens when he exceeds the limits of his own mana. After all, Arod was still released. He was already about to enter the girl, but Aria beat him to it. She just ran into the room, unable to hold back her emotions. The guys didn't even manage to stop her, and froze by the door. The daughter of the Louis family froze in horror and sank to the floor. Before them, on the bed, lay the body of Clax, pale, lifeless, with signs of decay. Arod looked at the adventurer, who quietly explained. The girl had completely exhausted her mana. The hero was told that mana exhaustion has different degrees. Every mage experiences dizziness or fainting at least once in their life after overload. If a person continues to use magic even after this, crossing their own limit, their mana no longer regenerates naturally. Arod asked what then awaits the mage. In response, the adventurers only turned away. They did not dare to tell the truth. Aria could not hold back, and, almost shouting, repeated the question. Then a familiar woman entered the room and said directly, "In such a case, the mage dies." The heroes looked anxiously at Clax's lifeless body. Leaving the room, Aria said anxiously that something had to be done. One of the defenders quietly replied that magical power, unlike physical power, can only be restored naturally. So they were powerless. The girl's assistant regretfully admitted that she had not looked after Clax and blamed herself. She added that Aria herself was the same, hot-tempered and careless. Arod, however, was convinced that the fault lay with him. He knew how Clax tried to meet his expectations by training without rest, and now understood that he was the one who had brought her to this state. The boy thoughtfully said that Clax was dying due to the loss of mana, which she could not restore. From this it followed, if they could find a way to return magic to a state of restoration, she could be saved. The comrades agreed, but warned there was no hope for natural recovery anymore. Everything depended only on life force. The girl was in an extremely critical condition. And then Arod suddenly shouted Aria's name. He was enlightened. He remembered Managuler, an ancient magic capable of restoring mana. The boy shouted so sharply that the girl did not immediately understand what he meant. Arod explained that he wanted to save Clax, and asked Aria to take him to a place connected with this magic. That very night they set out on the road. The carriage rushed along dark paths until they arrived at the Lewis estate. There they were met by Freya, who was surprised to see the little miss already at home. Seeing Arod, she asked what he was doing there. But Aria, ignoring the question, immediately asked if grandfather was at home. Freya replied confusedly that the master was in the study and wondered why Craig was not with them. The children quickly headed to the study. Aria walked confidently, not slowing down, while Arod awkwardly followed behind. The maids, meeting them in the corridor, politely greeted the girl and looked at the boy with surprise. The girl opened the door so sharply that it hit the wall. The old man fearfully rose from the table where he was working and, seeing his granddaughter, asked in surprise what had happened. Aria, without hesitation, asked to be taken immediately to the place connected with the magic of Managuler. The old man, understanding nothing, approached her and calmly asked why it was necessary. The girl replied that she would explain later. She insisted that the matter was urgent and every minute was worth a life. Grandfather still did not understand, but Arod thought it would not be easy to convince him. The young man recalled Count Barton's words that the place associated with magic was granted by the royal family. Therefore, access there was strictly limited. Meanwhile, the grandfather tried to calm his grandson. Arod advised Aria to explain everything herself, but she quickly whispered for him not to worry and to trust her. After all, she knows Grandpa better. They whispered quietly. Aria admitted that although she was no longer a child, to convince her grandfather, she had to use the spell she once swore before her father never to use again. But for Clax's sake, she was ready for anything. Arod was confused. He thought the girl only possessed fire magic. He thought it would be some kind of spell of suggestion or hypnosis, but it turned out to be much simpler. Aria approached her grandfather and said coldly, if he did not understand her, she would never speak to him again. Arod understood. This was the very same forbidden spell, and he was struck by how powerful it was. The granddaughter's words pierced the old man through and through. He dropped to his knees, stunned by pain. The boy realized that Aria had struck right at the weakest spot in his heart. The old man looked at her pleadingly, asking her to take back her words. But the girl turned away, showing that she was serious. Arod could not believe his eyes. Aria's behavior seemed extremely harsh to him. Grandfather slowly got up and rang the bell. A butler immediately appeared at the door. He was ordered to prepare the fastest carriage. The servant nodded obediently, and when he saw the cunning gleam in Aria's eyes, he immediately understood who had made the master change his mind. He only sighed and wearily rubbed his temples. The old man trembled with emotion, but approached his granddaughter and said the transport would be ready in a few minutes. Aria instantly smiled, hugged her grandfather, and said he was the best in the world. The old man immediately melted. His face lit up, and he gently stroked her head. Arod watched this scene, speechless. On the way in the carriage, the children told Freya everything. She listened attentively and agreed. If there is any chance to save Clax, it is only with the help of Managuler. When asked if she knows anything about this magic, the woman only sighed mysteriously. Freya explained that, working for the Count, she learned a lot about noble titles and ancient magic. Aria proudly said that Freya was the best among all her grandfather's mages. The boy did not know this before and was stunned. He asked if she had been at the Count Barton's party. Freya was pleasantly surprised that she was remembered, although all the attention was focused on Arod at that time. The boy laughed awkwardly and apologized. Recalling that day, Freya smiled and added that after the celebration the boy had a hard time because Aria was constantly arguing with him. The girl blushed and called out her name, indignantly but shyly. To ease the tension, Maginia asked if they wanted to stop and rest a bit. After all, they had been traveling since yesterday. However, Aria insisted that they must reach the place with Managuler as soon as possible. The girl asked what they would do next. Freya cautiously said that although ancient magic was supposed to heal exhaustion, she was not sure if it could be used again. Even Freya herself, who had studied ancient spells for years, did not know how to control them. Arod replied that the only thing left was to try, although he understood mentally that he could not reveal everything. The heroes realized there was no other chance. Only Managuler could save Clax. But suddenly, Aria asked what they would do if this place turned out to be the same as where the meteor strike was. She suggested taking Clax with them to immediately use the power of the statue. Arod admitted he had thought about it too, but reminded them of their friend's condition. She wouldn't survive the journey. Freya agreed. She explained that everything depends on the degree of exhaustion. If the mage's body is too weakened, it can simply crumble like a withered flower. Hearing this, Aria became worried. Freya asked how Arod even guessed about Managuler. The boy thought for a moment and briefly recounted the recent events with Aria and the Count. He suggested that the statues they saw in the hall were guarding something. Freya agreed. It made sense. Such constructions, which operate for decades, are created only for a specific purpose. Otherwise, they have no meaning. Friends realized that the golems reacting to ancient magic were not standing there for no reason. Aria decided that there might be the same ones in the place called Managuler. Freya slyly winked. She knew the children were heading exactly there because they believed they would find salvation for Clax there. The heroes exchanged glances and silently nodded to each other. When the sun was already dipping toward the horizon and flocks of parrots watched them from above, the heroes arrived at the place. They stood on a huge bridge, and Freya carefully explored around, while Aria pulled Arod forward. Looking at the massive statue towering above them, Freya asked if golems could really move and unleash ancient magic. Arod confirmed. Although these looked different, he had no doubt they were of the same origin. Magenia said she would go first and check the safety, but Aria no longer listened to her. She ran ahead, calling out to her friends. Freya smiled awkwardly, admitting that sometimes she couldn't keep up with this girl. Lavushka, one of the companions, noted that the hero treats everyone around like family, and she really likes that. Arod awkwardly thanked her and quickly changed the subject. The company moved further along the bridge, approaching the statues. Above them towered giant beams on which curious parrots sat. And suddenly, one of the golems turned its head toward them. The children immediately noticed this and stopped. Freya stood before them, shielding them. A sphere of light separated from the statue. It slowly approached and entered the mage's body. A bright glow illuminated her figure. Nothing bad happened. Freya felt a surge of strength and realized, this is Managuler. Arod asked if her mana had really recovered. She confirmed, and even said that it had become more powerful than before. Aria ran up and asked if this could save Clax. Freya nodded, still not believing that there was a power capable of restoring mana. Gathering her courage, she said that now they needed to find a way to take this magic with them. Freya thoughtfully said that it was unclear why the golems started moving right now. Aria asked to focus on the main thing, saving Clax. The mage agreed, but added that perhaps both events are connected. Arod began to analyze. In both places, only moving golems, so there must be some mechanism that activates them. The boy looked up and saw the glow of magical streams in the sky. He suggested that what the statues so desperately guard is the key to ancient magic, and if they can find it, they will understand the truth. The boy thought that if this were a game, then probably he would have to complete a quest or pass a trial. But suddenly, Freya shouted. The golems started moving. The statues raised their hands. They opened their mouths, and ancient magic began to burst out of them, the same glowing spheres that had earlier entered Freya. Light filled everything around. The girl jokingly said that it was as if they had stumbled upon a sale of ancient magic. The Aria cried out in despair that they should have taken Clax with them. Meanwhile, Arod, observing the chaos, suddenly understood the essence of what was happening and shouted for the girls to stay away from the streams of magic. He saw several bullets flying straight at Freya and instantly grabbed her, knocking her to the ground. A magical charge flew over them and hit the parrot, which immediately burst into flames. Freya slightly hit the ground and, understanding nothing, asked why he did it. Aria also stood in surprise, but in a moment they saw the bird hit by the magic of Managuler began to swell, then exploded. The heroes froze in shock. The giants opened their mouths wide, absorbing energy, then released new shining spheres. The heroes rushed to flee. Arod understood. Under such conditions, he would not be able to gather the fragments. If the statues pressed them on the bridge, escape would no longer be possible. Arod watched in horror as only a few feathers and bloody stains remained where the bird had been. He looked up and saw that the statues were again firing deadly bullets. The boy instantly warned his comrades. The golems opened their mouths, absorbing energy, then released new glowing bullets. The heroes rushed to flee. Arod understood. Under such conditions, he would not be able to collect the fragments. If the statues cornered them on the bridge, escape would no longer be possible. Suddenly, a bullet flashed right in front of Aria. She stopped abruptly. The boy shouted not to stand still, but the girl ran forward again. He shouted that one magic strike wouldn't hurt, but his heart still clenched with fear. Finally, the heroes crossed the long bridge. Even the parrot sitting on the columns flew away, leaving the cursed place. Breathing heavily, Freya thanked Arod for saving them. The boy quoted a passage from a book. Even medicine can become poison if the dose is exceeded. The girl jokingly called him a bookworm. Arod awkwardly scratched the back of his head, because in reality, in his past life, he read manga more often than books. He recalled that excessive energy restoration could be no less dangerous than its loss. Aria was worried that Managuler could only worsen Clax's condition. Arod objected with a slight smile. Freya explained, "Ancient magic cannot provide more mana than the user has. Its effect is always balanced. Golems will have to be dealt with later." Aria admitted that their mission turned out to be much more difficult than she had imagined. The boy suggested that they would have to go through some kind of trial. The girl asked if this meant that this very place was testing their endurance. Freya noted that her pupil had noticeably matured during this time. Aria blushed, but inside she blossomed with pride. The mage added that if her father saw her now, he would be amazed. And Count Louis, Freya laughed, would probably faint altogether. Aria steered the conversation back to the main point. What kind of trial was this, and what did it involve? Arod helplessly shrugged. He had no idea what they wanted from them. Freya wanted to study the golems, but now they couldn't even get close. The boy thought irritably that he should have foreseen this. He hoped to calmly collect the fragments, but forgot. Ancient magic is always unpredictable. Meanwhile, Aria froze upon hearing someone's words. The voice said, "Going straight ahead is not an option. Detours are too dangerous." The girl exclaimed in surprise, "Who is this?" And Freya and Arod immediately turned their attention to her. They asked what had happened to her. Aria replied that she heard a voice. Did they not hear it too? The friends exchanged glances, confused, and the voice sounded again, asking if she wanted power. The girl did not answer, embarrassed, but the voice now sounded simply in her head, even more insistently. "Do you want power?" Suddenly, Aria's body was enveloped in a strange light, and she began moving forward, straight toward the statues, as if losing control. Arod shouted for her to stop, and was about to rush after her, but Freya grabbed his hand. She pointed ahead. The place where the golems stood had changed. The statues bowed their heads and covered their faces. When Aria approached, the space exploded with dazzling light. The heroes had to cover their eyes with their hands to avoid being blinded. When the light faded, they saw that Aria was simply disappearing. Her body gradually dissolved into the air, and in a moment, The girl was completely gone. Finding herself in a weightless space, Aria looked around. No friends, no bridge. She tried to summon her firepower, but nothing happened. The voice spoke again. "Do you desire power?" The girl thought and shouted, "Yes, I need power." "Then choose," came the reply. 3 copies of Aria herself appeared before her. She froze in amazement. The voice promised, "Make your choice, and you will gain the desired power." One of the copies smiled and said that Aria would not recognize her. She was right. Then she introduced herself. "I am the power of the fireball." She raised her hands, created a blazing ball, from which a bird was born that flew upward, shining with flames. The first version sighed and praised herself for a good demonstration. She said she was the embodiment of Aria's diligence and determination, her persistence and belief in her own strength. Then the second one spoke. She reminded that Aria studied under Freya, after which a giant fiery bird flew from her hand. "If you improve a weak fire flash, you can create the strongest fiery phoenix," she said. This was the power of Aria's own desires. She added that she knew whom Aria emulated and offered her might to fulfill her dream. But the girl passed by and approached the third version. She quietly asked her name. The third Aria opened her palms, showing glowing spheres, and answered, "I am the ancient magic of Managuler." Hearing this, the girl grabbed her hands and smiled with relief. Now she would be able to save Clax. The other 2 powers did not resist. They only smiled softly. In the air, it sounded, "We are of one root, and I know what your heart desires." Everything around shone with light again. Meanwhile, the boys were in despair. Aria had simply disappeared, and suddenly, she was standing before them again. The friends froze. A moment ago she was gone, and now she seemed to have appeared out of thin air. Without explaining anything, Aria said she had mastered ancient magic and showed proof. Glowing spheres in her palms, just like Managuler's. Arod could not believe his eyes. Freya said in amazement that they had barely recovered after her disappearance. The girl smiled confidently and said she had something else to show. Saying a short spell, she created a fireball in her hands. The friends watched tensely. Aria raised her hand to the sky, and a huge fiery bird soared into the air, scattering sparks. Arod's and Freya's mouths opened in amazement. Freya asked how Aria managed to master both magics so perfectly. Arod also did not understand how it was possible. Aria replied that she had passed a trial. She was guided by feelings, and now she had mastered everything. However, no one ever understood what exactly she meant. Freya pondered. Gaining the power of Managuler, and at the same time strengthening her own ancient magic, sounded tempting. She asked how exactly Aria did it, but the girl waved it off, saying it was not the time to explain. They had to hurry to save Clax. Freya agreed. At that moment, Aria noticed that Arod was thoughtfully looking at the bridge. The boy was pondering whether there was another way to obtain the ancient magic, and what would happen if a second golem came to life. Suddenly he exclaimed that he had to check one thought, and ordered everyone to stand still. The hero ran back across the bridge to the statues, finally beginning to understand what exactly these ancient creatures were guarding. Arod realized it was he who activated the guardians. When the boy came closer, one of the statues lit up and moved. He deliberately provoked their reaction to trigger the mechanism. The Managulers were that ancient magic that could save both Aria and Clax. He decided to obtain it at any cost. Even if he failed the first time, he would try again. The sphere of light approached, and the boy, not letting it escape, managed to trap it in his palms. From the clash of fire magic and Managuler was born a giant bird that soared high above the bridge and golems. Its glow reflected in Aria's eyes, who watched this spectacle enchanted. Although Arod was glad that the plan worked, he felt that if he relaxed for a moment, his body would simply dissolve into the magical flow. Aria became worried. Freya calmly said that the previous events were just a joke of fate. Aria did not understand, and the sorceress reminded her, "The boy possesses a fireball," she explained. "To transform a bullet into a firebird requires a huge amount of mana." Now the girl understood why Arod was always exhausted after such magic. Aria noticed that the boy usually lacked energy, so nothing worked out. But now, with the power of Managuler, everything succeeded. Freya winked, as if to say, "A good observation." She added that even a single fireball requires incredible concentration, and controlling it is difficult. Aria agreed. Meanwhile, the boy continued to struggle with his own magic. Soon, a message flashed before him in the air. "A fragment of ancient magic of Managuler has reached the peak. Mastery is complete." When the evening sun was already touching the horizon, Arod finally returned to his friends. Aria immediately ran up, grabbed him by the shoulders, and began to check if he was wounded. The boy smiled and assured her that he was fine. The girl looked at him with admiration. Freya noticed this gaze and quietly laughed. Aria, embarrassed, sharply changed her tone and scolded Arod for frightening them with his action. Unable to bear the tension, she burst into tears. Between sobs, she said that now he had also started acting recklessly. Seeing her tears, Arod immediately apologized. To her question whether he had really become inattentive, the boy only silently lowered his head. Freya, observing them, agreed with Aria. The boy's actions were too risky. Such things could turn into a tragedy. She noted that this was perhaps just a manifestation of youthful overconfidence, but Arod did not seem so inexperienced as to not understand the danger. The boy bowed low and apologized for making them worry. Friends accepted his apology. Freya asked if he did it out of curiosity. The boy did not understand what that was about. Aria reminded that the most important thing now is to return home as soon as possible and save Clax. Leaving, Arod cast one last glance at the place where they found Managuler. He could not shake the thought. Why did he alone provoke such a reaction from the golems? Maybe because of his transformation in this world. The carriage rushed along the road to the castle. Looking out the window, Aria asked Freya how much farther it was to Sir Barton's estate. She replied that they would arrive by nightfall. The girl became worried and asked if they could go faster. Freya replied that they could, but it was dangerous. Fast carriages were not designed for such loads. Aria wanted to insist. Fear and anxiety for Clax overwhelmed her. Arod noticed this and quietly asked Freya to hurry up. He said that now, with Managuler in their hands, it would be shameful if they were late. The boy understood the risk, but decided to act. Freya just smiled and winked. It seems this is another one of those careless acts that Arod loves so much. After a brief conversation with the coachman, she warned the children to hold on tight. It would be bumpy. Aria instantly grabbed Arod's hand. When the carriage gained speed, the boy noticed something strange outside the window. Freya asked what happened. He replied that the road ahead was glowing. Maginia looked outside, but neither she nor Aria saw anything. Only darkness. Arod was surprised. Was he the only one who saw the shards of magic scattered along the road? And suddenly memories surfaced in his mind. The conversation between Count Barton and the butler Joseph. The boy wanted to shout to stop the carriage but didn't have time. The carriage jolted sharply, as if it had hit something, and it tipped over, overturning along with the passengers. Freya sighed as she climbed out of the overturned carriage. The coachman, pale with fear, rushed to her. She assured him that everyone was intact. Then she checked him and the horses. Fortunately, no one was seriously injured. Arod immediately ran to the place where he had seen the glow. Dozens of shards lay on the ground. The boy touched them. They seemed flat, but at the same time hollow inside. Freya approached and asked if it was hidden magic. She noted that leaving such fragments right on the road was too careless. Arod inquired if this happened often. The girl nodded. It happens, and it is always a bad sign. Freya pointed to the broken carriage and reminded that they now had much more important matters. But it was impossible to move on. One wheel was broken. Meanwhile, the coachman tried to calm Aria, who blamed herself for everything that had happened. With despair, Freya exclaimed that she regretted not learning to drive herself. Arod stood up, dusted himself off, and calmly said that everything would be fine. He asked her to rely on him. The girl followed, asking what exactly he had in mind. The boy called Aria. She ran to him with eyes wet from tears. The hero gently assured her that everything would be okay, then approached the carriage, thinking about where to start. Focusing, Arod used magic to repair. He removed the shards of the broken wheel and restored it using ice. Since the ice was fragile, the boy created a fabric base to strengthen the structure. For safety, he also removed the cracked window panes. Now, instead of the broken wheel, the carriage was held by a shiny ice disc. Aria asked if they could set off. The coachman confirmed that everything was ready. Arod added that the axle was undamaged, so the wheel would hold. Freya remarked in surprise that the boy also possessed ice magic. When the horses dashed forward, Arod constantly supported the ice wheel with magical energy. Thanks to the smooth road, he believed he could hold out until the estate of Count Barton. Aria peeked out the window and asked the boy sitting next to the coachman if she could help with anything. The hero advised her to rest instead. However, the girl was worried that Arod was spending too much mana. The boy reminded her that she needed to conserve her magic to heal Clax. Aria wanted to object, but Freya gently intervened. The mage said that it was more important now for Aria to preserve her strength. Her main task was still to fully recover. The girl obediently sat down. Seeing her anxiety, Arod thought that extra worries only exhausted her even more. As soon as they reached the estate, Aria and the boys jumped out of the carriage and ran into the corridors, where the Count was already waiting for them. He was sitting on a bench by the wall. Seeing the girl running toward him, the man stood up. She did not know where to start, so he spoke first, ordering them to go immediately to Clax. When Aria disappeared into the corridor, Count Barton realized the children had succeeded. Arod confirmed this. The boy noted with surprise how quickly the Count grasped everything. Just by looking at Aria, he immediately guessed that the mission was accomplished. Barton, watching the boy closely, said that they had brought the power of the Managuler, magic that humanity had considered lost. Arod once again realized how insightful this man was. He ordered him to follow Aria, and the boy immediately set off. They entered Clax's room, where adventurers who were on duty near the sick woman were still standing. Arod quickly asked how she was feeling. They looked at the boy with surprise, as they had seen ancient magic with their own eyes. Together, they peeked into the room where Aria was already standing by the bed, preparing to heal her friend. The girl focused and directed all her power to restore Clax's mana. This was her new magic. A few minutes passed, and the wounds on the friend's body began to quickly disappear, as if melting into the air. Aria was happy, but suddenly her face turned pale. The world darkened before her eyes. She was losing strength, but Arod managed to catch her. He anxiously asked if everything was all right. The girl blushed and stubbornly continued the spell, assuring that she had everything under control. The boy noticed how Clax's skin color returned to normal, but Aria's hands were already trembling. He understood. The girl was exhausted. The boy glanced at the adventurers by the door and decided to act quietly. Unnoticed, he transferred part of his mana to Aria. The girl felt a surge of strength and exclaimed that she could continue. However, Arod quickly realized it was ineffective. Mana spent on magic and mana needed for recovery were not the same. The boy realized this back when he was repairing the carriage. Using 1 unit of mana, he could restore only part of the energy, about 8/10. So an endless exchange was impossible. The same applied now. By transferring power to Aria, he lost more than she received. But the boy could not stand aside. For him, the main thing was to support his friend, not to adhere to theory. Despite everything, he stayed close, helping as much as he could. It was not about efficiency, but about faith. Aria sincerely wanted to save Clax, and he could not fail to support that. Finally, the efforts bore fruit. Clax opened her eyes. The girl slowly turned her head and saw her friends. Aria could not hold back and immediately hugged the maid. She was confused, not understanding why she was receiving such attention. The little miss was just happy. Her friend had woken up. Arod quietly asked how she felt. Clax asked confusedly if she had done something wrong. Aria explained that she was simply overworked from magic and had fainted. Arod added that mana exhaustion was a kind of illness, but now there was no danger. Aria reported that her own mana had already recovered and showed her hands, in which the residual energy of the Managuler shone. Clax exclaimed in surprise, and Freya emphasized that the girl had done incredibly. She had truly mastered the ancient power. The little servant became embarrassed and began to apologize for the trouble, but Aria interrupted her. She said that Lady Aria would prefer thanks to apologies. Clax smiled and sincerely thanked her. The little miss gently said in response that it was meant to be. After all, now she was the senior mage by rank and had simply fulfilled her duty. Freya ran up to Aria and hugged her tightly. She was truly proud of her pupil. Clax, watching this scene, felt a poignant joy. For the first time in a long while, she realized she was dear to someone too. The girl looked at Arod and thanked him as well. Sitting on the bed, Clax listened to her sensations. She literally felt the warmth of Aria's mana, which still pulsed in her body. The next morning, Clax, already full of strength, was dressing in her room. Birds were singing outside the window. Although she felt much better, the effects of the illness were still noticeable. Her hands trembled slightly. She sneezed at the very moment Aria opened the door. Hearing this, the girl understood everything without words. Clax asked guiltily if she had done something wrong. Aria came closer and sternly said that she was still sick and needed to rest. Clax tried to talk about the work waiting for her, but the serious look of the little miss instantly made her fall silent. At that moment, friends entered the room. Luis's daughter immediately began grumbling at the maid for wanting to work already after such an illness. Clax blushed and turned away. Arod supported Aria, saying that Clax needs to be more careful. When she started talking about duties again, the little miss interrupted her. Recovery is the most important thing right now. The hero thought that Aria behaves exactly like an older sister. He reminded that even the head maid ordered Clax to rest. Aria decisively laid the servant back in bed, threw a blanket over her, and ordered her to regain strength. But Arod understood Clax, too. He remembered himself from a past life. How hard it is to sit idle when work lies right nearby. After thinking a bit, he came up with a way to solve the problem of their overly diligent maid. Soon the friends set off to the place the boy intended to take them. Arod helped Clax out of the carriage, and the girl looked around in surprise. They stood in the yard near Arod's house. Aria happily introduced this place to Clax, and the hero himself modestly thought that his home was an ordinary building, nothing special. Learning that they were near his house, Clax began to examine everything carefully. The boy deliberately took her outside the estate, where she was constantly in maid mode. He wanted the girl to get some fresh air, but the hero doubted that the count and the butler would let them leave just like that. He approached the door and knocked, announcing his arrival. But there was no answer. The boy was surprised. There was no one in the house. He felt sorry. He wanted to introduce everyone to each other. Arod decided to return later. Going outside, he approached the girls, apologizing. Seeing that Clax wanted to say something, he stopped and listened to her attentively. And of course, she asked if she could help with anything. Hearing again about work, Aria rolled her eyes and jokingly said that today she wouldn't have to work at all. Arod laughed and suggested a walk. They walked through the forest. The boy showed various plants he knew. Pulling out one of them, Aria asked what it was. Arod explained it was a medicinal herb, Now was the harvesting season. His main occupation was collecting such plants and selling them. He added that during the walk, he would also gather herbs and suggested the girls help if they noticed similar ones, so they could both take a walk and earn a little money. The walk continued. Arod walked relaxed, hands behind his head, while Clax, on the contrary, diligently searched for the necessary plants, carefully digging up each one. Aria came closer and asked why he had arranged all this. The boy smiled. Clax is too serious. He thought it would be easier for her if she did something. So he gave her a simple, calm task for mental balance. Aria pondered and asked if nothing would definitely happen to her. Arod reassured her. Everything was under control. Their walk continued until they reached a blooming field. There, all three decided to rest, and Clax decorated her hair with a flower. Looking at them, Arod thought that the girls looked as if they had come for a picnic. He sat on a log nearby, smiling. It was good that he had brought them here, where one could finally just breathe in peace. And as soon as they moved on, they came across a bush with berries. The girls immediately began tasting them. Clax tried carefully, while Aria hesitated, not daring to bite. And then Arod heard a low growl nearby. He instantly stood before them, shielding them with his body. A wild boar emerged from the thickets. The hero ordered the girls not to move. He did not understand how they could have stumbled upon it, as he had led them along a proven path. Clax trembled with fear. Aria tried to calm her down. At that moment, the boar lunged forward. The boy wanted to use magic to push his friends aside, but the beast was already too close. Arod grabbed both girls and fell to the ground with them. The boar rushed past. The boy got up and ran in the opposite direction to distract the animal. When the beast almost caught up with him, Arod was about to summon a fireball, but he didn't have time. He had to dodge. His only goal was to prevent the boar from reaching the girls. Meanwhile, Aria shouted his name. Hearing the voice, the beast sharply changed direction and charged straight at them. Seeing this, Arod rushed forward, trying to intercept the animal. Then Clax pointed at Aria's hands, reminding her that she also had power. The girl raised her palms. They shone with flames. Aria created a firebird, which struck the boar with a swing, knocking it back. The power of the magic stunned Arod. When the danger passed, the girls laughed with relief. They celebrated the victory, and Arod praised Clax for excellent teamwork. Aria thanked her friend for the help, and she modestly nodded, still not believing that everything really ended well. Looking at the boar's carcass, for which he would receive a few silver coins, Arod did not hide his joy. It was nice that the adventure could also bring some benefit. Clax was also happy that she could at least help the team in some way. At that moment, an idea struck Aria. She suddenly turned to her friends and suggested creating a clan. Arod and Clax just exchanged surprised looks, not quite understanding what she meant. The little miss explained that a clan is a team of famous mages who have a common goal and travel together in search of adventures. Arod smiled and compared it to a party from an RPG game or a guild of adventurers. He jokingly added that then they would be like a team of detectives. The girls did not understand what detectives had to do with it, and the boy, smiling awkwardly, waved it off. He just remembered something. Clax shuddered and timidly asked if they really wanted to take her into their clan. Aria smiled broadly and confidently replied, "Of course, yes," but the girl only became more confused. It seemed impossible to her that an ordinary maid could become a member of the clan alongside a noble lady. Aria did not understand why she was so worried. Seeing that Clax was embarrassed and could not find words, Arod decided to help. He explained that Aria wants to unite specifically with her, not with someone else. Aria immediately confirmed these words, so Arod looked directly at Clax and asked if she wanted to be with them. The girl nodded so quickly that her hair flew apart. Aria rejoiced, clapped her hands. The decision was made. Now all that remained was to come up with a symbol for their clan. While Aria and Arod discussed options, Clax also pondered. After a short pause, she suggested a symbol in the form of a bird. Friends were surprised. Why exactly a bird? The girl explained. Miss Aria has a magical fiery bird, so such a symbol best reflects the strength and spirit of their team. Remembering the magic of Aria, Arod agreed. Her bird was truly beautiful. At these words, the girl blushed, but her smile revealed that she was pleasantly touched. Everyone agreed that the emblem would be a firebird. Now it was necessary to create the design. Arod broke a thin twig and tried to draw the symbol directly on the ground. Within a few minutes, there were already several versions there, and they looked, to put it mildly, terrible. When Aria saw his masterpieces, she laughed and said the guy had no talent for drawing at all. Arod thought her attempts were no better. Aria, still laughing, added that now she felt calmer, at least in something he was not perfect. Arod, not giving up, explained that his sketch was based on the Japanese symbol yatagarasu, a three-winged fiery crow, an ancient sign of solar power. But the girl didn't even listen. She stood up, approached Clax, and seeing her drawing, smiled broadly. "This is true beauty," she exclaimed, attracting Arod's attention. The boy came closer and was also surprised at how neat and harmonious Clax depicted the bird. He sincerely praised her, noting that she has real talent. The girl blushed, not expecting such words. Friends immediately decided to use Clax's drawing as the main emblem design. Aria added that real badges for the clan could be made from it. The little miss said that Grandpa would definitely help. He would be able to make them according to Clax's sketch. Arod imagined how the old craftsman would wholeheartedly take on fulfilling his beloved granddaughter's request. Aria was already calling the coachman to set off, but Arod stopped her. She did not understand why. The boy reminded her that first they needed to sell the boar. This was their first joint trophy. Clax asked how they planned to drag the carcass to the city, but Arod reassured her he had an idea. Soon the beast's body was completely frozen in a transparent cube of ice. The boy explained that now it would be easy to pull him. The cube would slide over the grass. And indeed, a wonderful idea. Arod asked Aria to amplify his magic with Managuler, and she readily agreed. While they were walking along the road, Aria laughed, discussing Arod's failed sketch, and jokingly told Clax that her friend tried to draw a three-winged bird. The girl laughed, and Clax couldn't help but quietly giggle. Finally, they reached the city market. Aria politely greeted the shopkeeper, and Arod thawed the carcass. The deal went well. They got their first money for the beast as a real team. After the sale, the girls noticed a shop with luxurious dishes. They pressed against the window, admiring the patterns. Aria asked Arod if this was a trinket shop. The boy replied that no, this is more of a workshop than a shop. He himself is here for the first time. Aria asked why then they came here. Arod explained that he wants to make a commemorative sign from the silver coin received for the boar, a symbol of their clan. After all, this coin is their shared trophy. Clax immediately supported the idea, calling it wonderful. Then they both looked at Aria. Her response decided everything. The girl was silent at first, then smiled warmly and said she completely agreed. They entered the workshop where the gray-haired craftsman worked. They told him about their desire, and he listened attentively. Clax sat down at the table and carefully redrew the symbol on the paper. The master accepted the payment and got to work. After some time, the trio received their first badges. On them shone the head of a firebird, the emblem of their new clan, born from friendship and a shared dream. Arod immediately noticed that although the badge was made of cheap iron, its quality was excellent. Moreover, the craftsman completed the work for just 1 silver coin. The boy smiled. They were lucky to come across such a craftsman, especially considering the city prices. Suddenly, Aria turned to the workshop and asked her friends to wait for her outside. After a few minutes, she came out, beaming with a smile. Arod asked what was going on. The girl calmly replied that she just wanted to thank the master on behalf of their entire clan. At that moment, the boy saw the master himself peek out of the door and wave to them. "Come again, young sorcerers," she said. The three newly made friends bowed in response. The new clan stepped onto the city square. Aria carefully examined her badge, while Clax and Arod had already pinned theirs to their clothes. The boy asked if they liked the emblem, and both girls nodded simultaneously. Satisfied with her new purchase, Aria walked ahead, humming a melody. The badge jingled in time with her steps. Clax and Arod walked behind, smiling, but suddenly the boy noticed a familiar figure ahead, his older brother. He recognized him too. Arod immediately realized that Robin was drunk. He didn't even have time to say anything before his brother started grumbling. Robin reproached that the head of the family personally allowed the boy to visit the house, but instead he wanders around the city with some children. The brother's gaze stopped on the shiny badge on Arod's chest. He contemptuously reminded him that the younger one was from a noble family and should care about warm connections rather than wasting time on amusements. In response, the boy ironically noted that the ability to drink was also not the best example to follow. Robin, without listening, threw out the phrase that the younger one only knows how to have fun, and left, staggering. Arod watched him go and wondered, had he ever seen his brother sober even once in his life? Clax quietly asked who that was. Aria answered for him, Arod's older brother. The maid was surprised to learn that the boy was not the only one in the family. The hero, in turn, was surprised that Aria remembered his brother. She explained that she had seen Robin a few days ago. Arod was even glad. It's nice when at least someone remembers your family. Clax was a little embarrassed for not having introduced herself to the brother yet, but the boy reassured her. There will be another chance, maybe even tomorrow. Watching Robin sway into the distance, Arod wondered if his brother was even capable of remembering faces at all. For a nobleman, connections are important, but with such habits. The boy sighed and hoped that someday that habit would come in handy. Friends continued their walk through the city. The streets were noisy. Some were walking dogs, others even camels. Someone was returning from shopping. Someone was selling directly from a cart. And suddenly, in the crowd, Arod saw a familiar face. It was a group of adventurers, and among them was a girl who once helped him with an important matter. She also recognized him and waved warmly, and the boy thanked her once again for the help. The adventuress waved it off as if it were nothing special, but for Arod it was important. Although she did not give precise answers about ancient magic, the boy understood that ordinary sorcerers knew nothing about it. The girls approached, not understanding whom he was talking to. Arod explained that this team helped him in the forest, and they are all good people. The adventuress waved to Aria and Clax in greeting. One of the men from the team noticed their matching badges and asked if they were a team. Aria proudly replied that they had recently founded their own clan. Another adventurer inquired if all three were mages. For experienced hunters, meeting three young mages at once was a good sign. They jokingly said that after such a meeting, they would surely be lucky with mana. The adventuress, recalling the conversation with the boy, understood why he was interested in ancient magic back then. She asked if he had managed to learn anything new. Arod wanted to avoid the topic, but Aria, not understanding, blurted out, "Now she possesses that very same ancient magic." The boy remembered Count Barton's advice, not to tell anyone about Managuler, and became embarrassed, but he calmed down, remembering that Freya also knew about ancient magic. Probably it was not a secret among the aristocracy. Yet he mentally realized Aria had said too much. To confirm her words, the girl demonstrated the power of Managuler by restoring part of the adventurer's mana. Startled, the woman asked what kind of strange magic this was. Aria replied smugly, "This is an ancient power, lost to most mages." However, since they were standing right in the middle of the city square, a crowd immediately gathered around the bright glow of Managuler, attracted too much attention. Arod did not like this at all. He quickly changed the subject, asking if the team was going hunting today. The adventuress replied that they had already returned from the battle and were going to exchange the obtained crystals for a reward. She explained exactly where they had hunted, and her companions grumbled a little. This time the loot turned out to be more modest. When they said goodbye to the team, Aria, full of enthusiasm, suggested to her clan to go hunting as well. Arod asked in surprise if she really wanted to go with just the three of them. The girl confidently stated that this would be their first joint mission. The boy froze, realizing that he would have to embark on a dangerous mission together with two children, whom he would also have to protect. At that moment, he realized that the same Japanese man from a past life still lived within him. Despite 6 years in this world, it was only a fifth of what he had lived before, and he still felt like a stranger. In this world, he thought, no one judges a person by age. If you are independent, you are seen as an adult. Arod smiled. He started working here as a child, but long ago became someone more than just a boy. For Arod, who grew up in a world where everything was clearly divided into childhood and adulthood, it was not easy to accept the new rules of this world after rebirth. Although it did not bother him when others perceived him as an adult, he looked at Aria and Clax and saw children in them. The boy thoughtfully looked at their clan emblem. The girls noticed and asked what happened. Arod shook his head in denial, as if to say nothing important. He just mentally reminded himself that these children, together with him, had defeated the boar, and thanks to that now have their own badges with a nice design. After a minute of silence, the hero suggested doing one more training session in the forest before the real fight. We need to prepare before facing the real monsters. When the three left the city and reached the clearing, Arod asked if they were ready. Hearing a confident yes, he threw a stone, and as soon as it touched the ground, it lit up. This was a special training magic stone. Everything around it lit up and trembled with energy. The friends became worried, but were fully ready for battle. Suddenly, a fragment of stone flew towards them. Clax instantly activated speed magic and Aradise magic, lowering his palms to the ground. An icy wall rose before them, taking the blow, but the force of the attack was too great. The wall cracked and in an instant shattered into pieces. Then Aria created a firebird that with a roar shattered a stone fragment, melted the ice, and left a puddle behind. The girl exclaimed joyfully that they succeeded, and Arod, smiling, began to analyze. He explained that the stone mechanism works like a switch activated by hitting the ground. The boy suggested, if they want to hone team interaction, they need to imagine a real enemy. For example, a wild boar. For this, he created a magical model. Arod thought that if that ice block were a real beast, such a combination of magics would easily stop it. Clax enthusiastically praised the coordinated work of Miss Aria and the young master. Aria cheerfully ran up to her friend, saying that she had also made a significant contribution. Arod knew that it was Clax's speed that became the key link in their attack. Glancing at the puddle reflecting his face, he briefly remembered the boar, but Aria had already distracted him with conversation. She said with a sparkle in her eyes that the three of them could overcome any monsters. The boy understood where she was leading and nodded. He agreed, adding that they would set off tomorrow after the mana was restored. For Arod, it was a great opportunity. If each of them gave their all, it would be a step toward true independence for all three. The boy promised to make an action plan that very evening, then turned to Clax, asking her to explain her quick spells in more detail, when suddenly a familiar girl adventurer ran up to them. She wanted to introduce them to people from the Magic Guild. Friends looked at each other in surprise. The girl explained that it is better to join the guild as a clan. Clax timidly noted that joining there is not an easy matter. Arod also heard about this and asked why she was offering help. She smiled and replied, because he remembered her. For her, it was pleasant. Few people remember someone they have seen only once. Arod awkwardly looked away. He did not think he had done anything special. But the girl disagreed. She explained that most people do not even pay attention to those they have met a few times. She added that usually such people are simply forgotten. But the guy replied that he is not the kind to forget kindness. To avoid continuing the strange topic, he asked his team's opinion about the guild. Aria flared up with excitement. Wonderful news. She looked at Clax, asking for consent, and immediately nodded. So, the decision was made. They support the idea. Arod informed the adventuress that their clan was counting on her help. She smiled and said she would talk to her friends from the guild and then find them. The boy thanked her. Upon parting, she asked his name to make it easier to contact. Walking away, the girl called out that they have a wonderful clan. Aria proudly confirmed this. After that, the heroes set off back to the city, to Arod's house, where they planned to spend the night. The next morning, the boy woke up from a warm sunbeam that was breaking through the window. He stretched, yawned, and felt a pleasant tiredness in his body after the previous day. Coming down from the attic, he met Clax downstairs. The girl politely wished him good morning. Arod asked how she was feeling. The maid smiled sadly, replying that she was already better. She thanked him for allowing her to spend the night in his room. The boy just waved his hand, as if to say it was nothing special. Guests rarely come to the house, so they simply have no free rooms. He noticed that Clax was holding a bowl of water and asked if Aria had woken up. She replied that the little miss had just gotten up. The boy went into her room, greeted her, but the still sleepy friend did not even respond. Clax immediately followed him, placed the bowl on the table, and took a comb out of the suitcase. Aria sat with half-closed eyes, while the maid carefully combed and braided her hair. Arod said he was going downstairs to inform the family, and then added that they would wait for Aria too. Clax cheerfully replied that she would get the young lady ready. The boy went down to the kitchen. There the father was already sitting at the table, and the mother was busy by the stove. The younger brother was bustling around them. It seemed everyone was already up. Not seeing Aria, the father, Ryan, inquired where their guest was. Arod explained that Clax was helping her get ready. The man reminded that the daughter of the Louis family was an honored guest, and the responsibility for her lay with him. The boy froze, then nodded seriously. He understood. Ryan noticed that his son was thoughtful and asked what had happened. Arod replied that he was just amazed. Even knowing who Aria was, his father behaved normally and calmly, completely unlike Robin. The hero remembered how during their first meeting, Robin kindly praised Aria for her luxurious dress and her family's wealth. His thoughts were interrupted by a loud word from his father. Ryan wanted his son to remember something. The father reminded that a true aristocrat must know how to behave according to the situation. They must uphold the dignity of their name. Ryan added that although their branch is a side one, it is not worth constantly belittling their position. Arod began to understand. In the main ancestral home, their family were only guests. But here, in this estate, they were the masters. And this changes behavior. For the boy, such a social game seemed even more difficult than any magical etiquette. At that moment, Robin, already dressed, entered the kitchen and asked if Miss Aria had not yet come down. The elder brother sat at the table, asked his mother what would be for breakfast, and joked whether it would be embarrassing in front of the girl from the Lewis family. A few minutes later, Aria herself came down to them, greeted politely, and the morning in Arod's house began. After breakfast, the friends took a basket with provisions and set off to the field. On the way, Arod asked if it was comfortable for the girls to sleep on his beds. They smiled, saying the bedding smelled like him. Aria added that this scent reminded her of the meadows near her own estate. Hearing that he smelled of grass, the boy suggested taking a walk before hunting. The girls did not object. Stopping near an old tree, beside which a magical shard faintly glowed, Arod noticed that the road here had been washed away by rains. Finding nothing interesting, he was already about to go further when he heard a strange sound. A rabbit was struggling in a trap. Aria asked in surprise if that was also his magic. The boy confirmed. The girl asked if it was the same technique as yesterday. He nodded again. Arod explained that he had used the same spell as during training. Aria jokingly asked if his training consisted of hunting rabbits. The boy answered seriously, exactly so. While they were talking, the rabbit pushed inside the cage until it broke the wall and jumped to freedom. The hero wanted to stop it, but realized it was too late. Arod sighed disappointedly. He was sure everything would work. Then he muttered that he wanted to deliver the animal alive. Aria asked in surprise why, and the boy explained that a live beast costs more at the butcher. The boy recalled that he used to kill rabbits with ice spears, but this time he wanted to try to save the animal's life by creating an ice cage. However, it turned out to be too fragile, and he concluded that such magic is not suitable for the warm season. Even despite the fact that he once trained to control ice shards with inch precision, the technique made no sense if it could not be applied in practice. Clax said that on the contrary, it was wonderful that he even came up with such an idea. The boy thanked her for the support. He understood that as a mage and as a nobleman, he must always respond properly, both in words and deeds. Aria, interested, asked if any spell could be delayed in time. The boy assumed that yes, at least it worked with a fireball. Hearing this, the girl asked him to teach her. Arod clarified if she wanted to try right now. Aria turned to Clax, asking if she minded changing plans a bit. The maid cheerfully agreed. They went out to a spacious clearing where they could train safely. Aria began practicing under Arod's supervision, again and again, until many small magical shards sparkled around them. A lot of time passed, and the boy, tired, almost dozed off. He was awakened by Aria's voice. He apologized for almost falling asleep, but the girl took it calmly. Aria called him to lunch. She had already taken food out of Clax's basket. The maid sat on a spread blanket and laid out the dishes. Arod smiled and went to them, anticipating a homely taste. But as soon as he came closer, he felt the delayed magic begin to penetrate his body. He was surprised. Aria had already achieved the result. The girl proudly said it was thanks to a good teacher. The boy involuntarily remembered his mentor. Arod noted with surprise that Aria was able to create delayed magic of the Managuler. She sincerely thanked him for the teaching. The boy wanted to reply that there was nothing special about it. But suddenly he froze. He felt something. Aria asked what happened, but the boy just waved his hand, not taking his eyes off the field where they trained. There was not a single shard of magic left on the ground, although after such experiments, they should have been everywhere. He pondered, not knowing that his suspicion was correct. The shards really were there, but they were taken by an invisible creature whose tracks now remained on the soft soil. After lunch, everyone thanked for the delicious food. Arod said with a smile that he would remember this day for a long time, especially the moment with the magic. Clax beamed and said it was all thanks to Aria, but she shyly objected, saying she had done nothing special. The girl stood up and said she could show something else. She created Managuler and made it spin around her. The boy was genuinely impressed. Aria explained that it was Clax who suggested she try such an idea. The maid awkwardly objected that she could not imagine how she could help the young lady, but Aria told her the idea came when she saw her picnic basket. Meanwhile, Arod pondered the nature of delayed magic. In the usual case, activation and effect occur simultaneously, only with a delay. But in Aria, everything worked differently. She cast the spell, but delayed the effect, separating activation from mana consumption. The boy realized that his friend possessed magic on a completely different level. Noticing that he had sunk into thought, Aria called him. The boy asked how long she could keep Managuler close to her. The girl calmly replied, as long as needed. She added that the spell remains active, as long as she herself does not touch it. It was hard to explain more precisely in words, so Aria smiled and said that Arod would understand better if he felt it himself. Aria admitted that she managed to perform delayed magic only with Managuler, but not with the fireball or the firebird. Suddenly, Arod had a bright idea. The reason was that the Luis family had possessed Managuler since ancient times, so Aria could control this magic on an instinctive level. Clax confessed in surprise that she did not know that ancient magic belonged to the Louis family. Arod began to ask Aria in more detail about her abilities. After a long conversation, the boy concluded, Managuler is not just a delayed spell. It can be activated by leaving the effect in reserve, and as long as it is not used, mana is not spent. Arod compared it to a portable phone charger. Moreover, Aria's magic orb could become invisible without any spell. Watching this, Arod realized that only she herself could do this. The maid and the hero tried to touch what Aria Managuler had created, but they could not. They saw it, but their hands passed through it, while Aria herself interacted with it easily. This meant that Managuler obeyed only her will. The girl asked if he wanted to know anything else. The boy smiled. No, she had already answered everything. Now it remained only to assemble all the pieces of the puzzle in his head. For Arod, the very fact that the Count's daughter could possess lost ancient magic seemed like a typical cheat from a manga or light novel. But he himself was the reincarnated boy who now lived in a world that seemed to him like the pages of a comic. Aria noticed the strange expression on his face and asked what had happened. The boy just smiled. The girls didn't even realize how incredible the magic of the Luis family was. They, not understanding what was meant, just looked at each other. Arod explained that if you do not overload yourself with spells, mana usually fully recovers daily. Clax, hearing this, anxiously repeated his words, as if taking them personally. She apologized, thinking he was hinting at her recent weakness. The boy immediately denied it, apologized, and explained that he meant nothing of the sort. Then he continued his reasoning. If Aria does not spend mana during the day, but stores it externally in the form of a Managuler, then the next day she will be able to use double the reserve. After this, all three understood what advantage Aria had. She assumed that if they continued in the same spirit, on the third day, there would be even more mana, on the fourth, even more, and so on endlessly. The girl joked that if you don't use magic for a few days, you can accumulate a gigantic reserve of energy. Arod confirmed. That's exactly what he meant. Even if you don't give up spells completely, you can still set aside at least half every day. Aria agreed with this, and even Clax saw logic in the formula. Aria said that then, an incredible amount of mana would accumulate in her repository, and Arod added, with such power, she would be able to resist even the highest mage. Once in the future, the boy thought, Aria, having become a professional sorceress, will wear on her clothes the badge of her first clan as a symbol of the beginning of a great journey. The friends continued to move deeper into the forest. Arod warned that this time they would not go far. The bullet of Managuler, as if alive, followed the girls. Clax, smiling, said she felt as if the very life force itself was flying beside them, watching them. Arod decided to try to repeat the trick himself. But as soon as he tried to control the magic too much, nothing worked. The Managuler simply dissolved. The boy realized that Managuler, who restores mana, is a rare form of ancient magic, but not at all like he had imagined it. Ancient magic fundamentally differed from ordinary spells. It belonged only to the chosen ones, those who inherited it through blood. Only the heirs, like Aria, could truly possess it. Suddenly, Arod became alert. He asked the girls to stop and ordered Clax to use her quick magic. She immediately rushed forward, approaching the old tree. After her spell, the stump standing ahead trembled and began to move, rising on its roots. It was a monster. Arod could not recall its name, but Clax exclaimed, "It is a Trent." However, it was alone, which was strange for this type of creature. The boy ordered Aria to act just like yesterday during training. She nodded. Arod created an ice wall before them, blocking the monster's path. The Trent began to cut through the ice with its roots, while Aria prepared a spell. She summoned a firebird, which flew into the sky and struck the monster from above. The tree burst into flames. Thick smoke covered the battlefield. Everything was going according to plan. Aria was already rejoicing in victory, but Arod warned it was too early to celebrate. They saw that despite the flames, the monster was still moving. Arod noted that this Trent was stronger than usual. He decided to distract it while Aria prepared a new attack. The boy quickly realized the creature reacts to movement. So instead of a new wall, he created ice decoys. Several human-shaped ice figures grew around the Trent. The monster rushed at them, smashing them with its long roots. Meanwhile, Aria launched another firebird, and this time the enemy fell, burned to coal. Only a magical crystal remained on the ground. Clax anxiously asked if the boys were injured. They replied that everything was fine, and thanked her for her concern. The servant sighed with relief. A few ice statues created by Arod remained around. Aria noticed them and said they looked like works of art. The boy replied that it was precisely thanks to Clax that he managed to create these statues on time. But she just shrugged, saying she simply cast the spell at the right moment. Arod compared her actions to a cook preparing a complex dish. If you don't do everything on time, everything will be ruined. He added that even Count Barton himself said that coordinating magic is extremely difficult. Aria also praised Clax, noting that her quick spells allowed her to summon the bird with perfect accuracy. The girl was touched. Being useful to the team meant a lot to her. But suddenly, a familiar adventurer appeared from behind the trees. He looked worried, but was glad to see that they were all right. "Quickly! Leave the forest!" he shouted. Arod did not understand what was going on until the man explained. Someone invisible is attacking people from the shadows in the forest.